Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Iron Fanfics, back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Becomes Romantic Chef? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Izuku didn't know when it started. Maybe it was the first night his mom had to work late, and she left him instructions on how to reheat the mac and cheese in the fridge for dinner. Maybe it was the day he started making his own bento boxes because he had to get up early while his mom worked extra hours to support them. Maybe it was when he ended up getting a part-time job at the restaurant by his house washing dishes, to buy himself more All Might merchandise, of course, and he accidentally knocked some vegetables into one of the stews, nearly getting him fired, but also somehow causing the patron who ate it to cry tears of joy. Actually, it was probably that last one. Because ever since then, people have been lining up outside his and his mom's apartment, practically throwing money at them for Izuku to cook them a meal. He didn't hate it. It was nice having positive attention for once. Izuku Midoriya, you may enter. Izuku stood up from his chair, practically vibrating with excitement as he entered his designated test room. Well, excitement and nervousness. Mostly nervousness. Could you blame him, though? This was the most important moment, second, minute, hour, day. He shook his head as he walked forward, his dark green curls shaking slightly atop his head as he tried to clear his mind. The point was this was important. Super duper important. Izuku took a deep breath and walked through the double doors that would decide his fate. And suddenly had to pick his jaw up from the floor. A lunch rush? He gasped in awe, eyes going wide with wonder as he stared down the masked chef. It wasn't every day that he met his idol, after all. The hero was in his standard uniform, as he always was, his chef's coat completely pristine while his hat and mask guarded his face, ensuring the man's personal identity remained a secret. Izuku was kind of jealous that he didn't think of that, or, well, didn't think of that before he started having lines down the city block full of rich people begging for him to make them breakfast. That had gotten old after the first few hundred mornings. Lunch Rush offered a thumbs up to him as he stared slack-jawed at the hero, before simply gesturing towards the cooking station behind him. No words were spoken, but Izuku understood. It was time to cook. Izuku wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his arm, eyes focused squarely on the food in front of him as he toiled tirelessly. Lunch Rush watched silently from behind, offering him a towel. He gratefully accepted. That was about the extent of the pro's help, but that was fine. Izuku didn't need help. Well, it would have been appreciated. He wasn't smug about his cooking skills, but he understood that this was his exam and that it was up to him to succeed on his own. He quickly stirred the broth in the pot to his left, and the other 19 just like them, before switching to the absolutely massive bowl of vegetables that was well on its way to becoming a salad. He reached elbow deep into the mass of green, stirring and turning over as much as he could in such a short time, before moving to the 4 sets of ovens behind him to make sure nothing was burning. If he couldn't prepare lunch for an army of hungry students after their exam to become heroes, what kind of chef was he? What kind of support hero couldn't feed a measly few hundred? He knew the stories about Lunch Rush. The man observing him had created a full-course French meal for over 10,000 typhoon victims on his own once. To Izuku, that was the bare minimum for him if he wanted to succeed. It had to be, if he wanted to be the greatest support hero in the world, that was. And that was his goal, so he shook his head slightly as he worked, the hairnet he had donned keeping everything steady up top as he worked. Izuku would have died of shame on the spot if someone found a hair in the food he prepared for them. Izuku whisked a bowl of cream with a fury he only reserved for cooking, keeping pace with the 3 other automatic whisks. It would have been easier to just do another batch after they were finished instead of doing this bowl by hand, but where was the fun in that? And anyone could press a button on a machine to prepare food, something Izuku truly disdained. To him, it wasn't from the heart if it wasn't made by hand, but he was on a time crunch. But only the truly dedicated could beat cream into stiff peaks. He placed the bowl down just in time to turn off the stove, emptying the half-dozen pans of eggs, bacon, hash browns, and fried tomatoes into their respective bins before starting the process all over again. Minutes flew by in seconds. It felt like he had hardly started when Lunch Rush stepped forward, raising his hand silently. Izuku nodded back meekly, allowing the hero to take charge of his station once more. Even just watching him plate everything was breathtaking. His arms moved faster than Izuku could track, little more than blurs as Lunch Rush went to work setting up everything he had prepared for the oncoming surge of people. And, sure enough, the doors opened the moment he finished. Enough food to feed over 1,000 hungry teens as they rushed into the cafeteria, all equally exhausted from whatever exams they took, whether it was heroics, business, management, or support, all were about to try his food. A girl with a round face and brunette hair smiled at him as he stood behind Lunch Rush, and he couldn't help but feel shy. The smile? Without knowing what his quirk was? That was so nice. He tried to gather the courage to smile back, but she was already well past him. Despite knowing just how his quirk worked, Izuku couldn't help but hesitate as the first few UA hopefuls began lining up with their trays. What if he messed up? What if he hadn't made enough? What if they just didn't like him? Or his food? He mumbled long enough for the first students to get their food, giving him weird looks as he stood beside Lunch Rush, but that was neither here nor there. Sit down and take a bite. Of course, the lunchroom went dead silent as one of the students, a girl with pink skin and equally pink hair, after her first bite of the lemon meringue Izuku had thrown together. She was not the only one. All of a sudden, the orderly lines were gone. People who had gotten their food finished in record time and rushed forward to rejoin the lines, while the people who hadn't yet eaten suddenly looked very eager to see what was turning their fellow students into it. Suffice to say, Lunch Rush suddenly had his hands full swatting away grabby hands, keeping an eye on the students that were looking ready to steal from their fellow UA wannabes, and making sure food didn't go everywhere with all the people trying to get a taste of everything. A half-dozen heroes got called in the moment quirks started getting involved. The girl who had smiled at him was spinning wildly through the air. He heard Katsuki's explosions going off in the distance. It was anarchy. Izuku felt really guilty, but that sullen look was wiped away in an instant when Lunch Rush turned to him in the middle of the chaos and offered him a thumbs up. Thumbs up only meant one thing. He passed. Izuku nearly cried tears of joy as Lunch Rush pat him supportively on the shoulder. This was his dream come true. This was his hero academia. Izuku hesitated in front of the door to 1A, all the previous excitement beginning to ebb away as he stood in front of the massive wooden barrier to his homeroom. What if his classmates didn't like him? He knew Katsuki was in his class, but he couldn't really be included. They had known each other forever, and he was pretty sure that they still didn't quite count as friends. What if they thought his quirk was lame? That had happened before. Granted, most people changed their minds after trying his cooking, but he didn't want to bribe people to be his friend. Or, well, at least not at the start. He liked cooking for people, but he liked it when he cooked for people who weren't only around for his cooking, if that made sense. Izuku wanted to cook for people who liked him. Not for people who liked his cooking. Well, at least for people who liked him and his cooking. Just not for people who only liked him because they liked his cooking. Wait, no, now he was confusing himself and, "Hey, are you okay?" He was not proud of how off guard he was taken by that soft, gentle voice. Nor the way he yelped in surprise, practically jumping out of his skin. Izuku whirled around in near fright, only to meet the gaze of the girl who had smiled at him yesterday. She looked concerned, her hand half extended towards him as if she wanted to help but didn't know how to. Her eyes lit up in recognition at the sight of him. "Oh, you're that curly-haired boy," she said, completely oblivious to the whirlwind of shame coursing through his bones. "From the exam. You were helping Lunch Rush make all that food for everyone, right?" Izuku just sagged in relief at the fact she hadn't called him out on reacting like a scared kitten. At his shy nod, she continued talking. "That food was really good. It might have been the best thing I've ever eaten." She cupped her cheeks in her hands and made just about the cutest face he'd ever seen. "I mean, I've heard Lunch Rush was an amazing cook, but, wow. I can understand why the whole cafeteria started fighting for more. Did you get to eat any of it?" He shook his head slowly, still struggling to formulate words. Izuku couldn't believe he was talking to anyone, let alone a really cute girl. It was too good to be true. She tapped a finger against her chin thoughtfully, unbothered by his lack of vocal response. My name is Uraraka Ochako. What's yours? Say, I kind of figured you were a new member of the lunch staff. Or maybe an apprentice for lunch rush. Why are you in front of class 1A? Are you lost? This is the class for the hero course. I don't know what class you're in, but if I had to guess it would be something like support. The wind left his sails quicker than you could say, chef. She didn't think he even belonged here. Any potential words of friendliness, or anything else, died on his lips as he wilted like a dead rose, regardless of her kind intentions. I'm in this class, Izuku whispered faintly, already completely defeated, even if I don't look like it. He turned meekly, ignoring her confused and slightly worried look, and opened the door to class 1A. Get your shoes off that desk this instant. A stern voice reprimanded, that is unbecoming of a hero. Katsuki just scoffed. Shut up. I'll do what I want, Glasses. What junior high did you crawl out of? Glasses looked affronted by the blonde's mocking response, quickly changing his strategy. Perhaps we got off on the wrong foot, he tried. I'm Ida Tenya from Semi-Private Academy. He offered Katsuki his hand. Katsuki offered him the middle finger in return. Semi-huh. He sneered. You think you're better than me just because you went to some elitist private school? I'm gonna have fun showing you your place at the bottom of the... He froze as his eyes landed on Izuku, who was silently observing from the door, and trying to ignore the girl who was still behind him. Deku, he sneered, the Pomeranian's eyes narrowing in disdain. So you're in the same class as me, huh? I'll have fun showing you your place too. Izuku just sighed. Same old Katsuki. At least he wasn't making death threats anymore. Hi, Kaken, he greeted awkwardly, offering the angry blonde a hesitant smile as he found an empty seat. Right behind him. Katsuki twitched in anger. Stupid nerd. You're going to distract me while I'm trying to pay attention with all your food. Are you trying to sabotage me? He roared. If you're here to make friends, you can leave now. A massive, yellow caterpillar inched its way across the floor, sliding past Izuku and Uraraka until it was at the front of the room. Once it began to stand, he dimly realized that it wasn't a caterpillar, and was just what looked to be a homeless man in a sleeping bag. A homeless man that was slurping on a very unhealthy jelly packet, might he add. It took all of you almost 8 seconds to quiet down, the man noted, his slightly bloodshot eyes boring straight through the classroom. They lingered on Izuku for a moment before flickering away, something that made him unreasonably uncomfortable for his first day. That's unacceptable. If you hope to stay in this course, there's no time for frivolities like that. He pulled out a standard gym uniform from his sleeping bag, holding it up for all of them to see as he stepped out of the yellow comfort sleeve. I'm your homeroom teacher, Aizawa Shoyuda. Nice to meet you. It's kind of sudden, but put this on and go out to the field. And with that, he walked away like he wasn't even there in the first place. Uraraka glanced awkwardly at the gym uniform he left behind. Does one of us have to wear the one he kept in his bag? A Quirk assessment test? The class all looked equally stunned, except for a boy with half-red, half-white hair that immediately reminded Izuku of candy canes, which he loved to make, and a girl that looked like she had been brought to this school straight from the Imperial Palace. He was only moderately intimidated by her. And she hadn't even looked his way yet. What about the entrance ceremony? And orientation? Uraraka asked worriedly, standing beside Izuku in the front. If you're going to become a hero, their homeroom teacher said plainly, you don't have time for such leisurely events. UA's selling point is how unrestricted its school traditions are. That's also how the teachers run their classes. Izuku had a hard time believing this man was a pro-hero. He'd never seen one who looked so worn out. He looked like he needed a nap, which might have explained the full-body sleeping bag from earlier. You kids have been doing these since junior high, right? Aizawa asked rhetorically, physical fitness tests where you're not allowed to use your quirks. This country still uses averages taken from results where students are not allowed to use them. It's not rational. The Ministry of Education is procrastinating. Izuku tilted his head slowly, despite the fear creeping into the back of his mind. Ministry of Education? Was their homeroom teacher giving him a political lecture? Was this going to be on the exam? Was there going to be an exam? He had too many questions and not enough answers. But Kogu, the dreary man called, you finished first in the practical exam. In junior high, what was your softball throw? Katsuki ignored the glances thrown his way by the reveal of his victory. 67 meters, he said flatly. Aizawa just tossed him a softball. Try doing it with your quirk. He gestured to a throwing range behind him, where white lines were painted onto the ground to measure the distance, as well as a circle for the thrower to stand in. Anything goes as long as you stay in the circle. Give it all you got. That might have been the least encouraging encouragement Izuku had ever heard. Aizawa didn't even seem unhappy, he just seemed kinda bored of it all. Why was this guy a teacher again? Katsuki stretched for a moment, loosening his arm up before a wild grin took over his features. Die! He roared, chucking the ball as hard as he could into the stratosphere with an explosion. Well, okay, it didn't go that high. Izuku knew the strength of his explosions would probably only get him to around 705.2 meters, Aizawa stated plainly, showing off the tally to his classmates. Knowing your limits is the most rational way to form the foundation of a hero. Everyone was stunned. Well, everyone except for Izuku. And the candy cane boy. And the intimidating regal girl. And Katsuki. And their teacher. 750 meters? A blonde boy with a black lightning bolt through his hair repeated, seriously? The MMM girl, which was the name Izuku designated the pink-haired and pink-skinned girl with black scara who was first to taste his food after the exams, clasped her hands together excitedly. This looks like it'll be fun. We can use our quirks as much as we want. Another boy spoke up, this one with short black hair and a plainer face than Izuku, as expected from the hero course. Just about everyone seemed to share their boundless enthusiasm. Except the same exact people who weren't stunned by Katsuki's performance, himself included. Were some of his classmates too serious to be showing emotion? Were they part of a coolness club? Katsuki was kind of cool, but also kind of a sometimes. Were Candy Cane Boy and the Scary Girl cool, or DS? Oh crap, he had the same reaction as all of them both times. Was he cool? Or was he a D-? Was this why he could never make friends? Their homeroom teacher was not pleased by the excitement running through the class. It looks fun, huh? He repeated derisively, you have 3 years to become a hero. Will you have an attitude like that the whole time? Aizawa went silent for a moment, and then he smiled at them, and that scared Izuku more than when Katsuki smiled, which was how he knew they were fed. All right, he said serenely, we'll make it fun. Whoever comes in last over all 8 tests will be judged to have no potential and punished with expulsion. Izuku's blood ran cold. Yep, he was fed. In the cafeteria, Lunch Rush paused. Something was off. Beneath his mask, his eyes narrowed. There was an imbalance in the culinary force. His pupil was in trouble. Izuku was right. Despite some of his classmates' protests, specifically Uraraka, which made him feel a little bit better about her after she dismissed him so easily at the entrance to their classroom, their teacher was set in his ways. Last place was going to be expelled. And last place was going to be Izuku. He tried his best. He really did. But there wasn't much he could do against girls who could make acid and skate on it or could touch things and make them float into space, or boys who had the ability to make extra limbs or discharge electricity. And those were the tame quirks. There was a girl, the scary, composed, regal one, who unbuttoned her shirt and made a cannon come out. A cannon. And she used it to shoot a baseball. And she still had enough in the tank afterwards to make a bicycle for the long-distance run. Against that, there was no way he could compete. The class crowded around as Aizawa displayed their names on a holographic screen. Izuku just knew he wouldn't be in the top spot, or the top half, but maybe he could hope against hope and have somehow ended up in 19th? 19th and a half, maybe? Nope. Right next to the big fat 20 at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. Midoriya Izuku. His face fell. He shouldn't have been surprised. His chance at becoming a hero? Gone. His chance at making real friends? Gone. His chance at ever opening a hero-catered restaurant, that also fed anyone who came through the doors with a happy smile, making sure no one left hungry? Well, that one was still up in the air, but being expelled from UA would probably leave most banks hesitant to loan him the money required to buy a building to start his restaurant from, so it wasn't like this could help in any way. Aizawa looked at him silently as the other students watched his facade crumble. Not that it was very good to begin with, he knew he had his heart on his sleeve. "You didn't even use your quirk, Midoriya?" he said flatly, eyes narrowed. "Was this a game for you? Did you think you could try and beat one of your classmates without using everything in your power to surpass them? I don't waste time on people who can't even." His homeroom teacher was interrupted as Lunch Rush suddenly came bursting through the doors of the school, sprinting towards the field where his soon-to-be former classmates were arrayed. The chef-hero hybrid came to a stop right beside Aizawa, glanced at Izuku, who was failing in his venture of not bursting into tears, despite the attempts of Uraraka to try and console him, glanced at the scoreboard, and then glanced at Aizawa. Lunch Rush gave the man a thumbs down. Actually, that wasn't right. He gave the man two. And then also gave him a small manila folder. Aizawa's blood ran cold. Lunch Rush never gave thumbs down. The hero leaned in towards him, and then Aizawa's blood froze completely. "Expel him," Lunch Rush whispered, inaudible to the students arrayed, "and I'm going to show you just how easy it is to mess with people's food when you're the chef." Lunch Rush never spoke. And with that, the hero left. Aizawa was afraid. His gaze flickered between the crying Izuku, the scoreboard, and the folder in his hands. He pressed a button on his remote, and the scoreboard suddenly shifted. Uraraka gasped beside him, her eyes going wide. "Midoriya," she whispered, shaking him encouragingly. "Ok." Izuku really didn't want to, considering he was, expelled and humiliated and crying, and had completely missed Lunch Rush's arrival, threat, and departure, but he reluctantly raised his gaze to the score list once more. "Izuku Midoriya. What?" he whispered in disbelief, eyes flickering towards the last spot. Now held by one Mineta Minor. A cry of indignation erupted from one of his classmates, the short boy with purple ball for hair. He fell to his knees in shock, eyes streaming tears even faster than Izuku's had been. "Did I miscalculated the scores?" their homeroom teacher said plainly, only a small hint of fear creeping through his otherwise monotone voice. "Congrats on first place, Midoriya." Murmurs of confusion and disbelief rose up from the class. None were louder than Mineta. "Why you can't do this?" he cried out, pointing dramatically at Aizawa. "I gave it my all. I used my quirk and got better scores than he did. I can't be expelled. Pasu. My grandma is a lawyer." Aizawa just looked at him coolly. "Daruya. I was lying about the expulsion thing. It was a rational deception to draw out the upper limits of your quirks." That would have been easier to believe if he hadn't just ripped Izuku's soul out of his body and crushed it while their entire class was watching. Of course that was a lie. Yaoyorozu, the girl who had actually gotten first place, and now sat at second, said, looking between Izuku and Mineta with a slightly concerned look, "It should have been obvious if you just thought it through." Even as she said it, he could tell there was a hint of hesitation in her words. Either Aizawa was a really good actor, or he really didn't like Izuku. Maybe both? Probably both. This guy was scary. That was a little nerve-wracking, huh? Shiro breathed out, one of the original instigators of the expulsion threat from Aizawa. He seemed relieved to not have been in the line of fire anymore, despite his middling result. Kirishima, a boy with spiky red hair and a hardening quirk, grinned. "I'll take up the challenge anytime." Aizawa slowly skimmed through the manila folder in his hands as the students conversed, the look on his face slowly transforming from flat to unsettled to mildly horrified at whatever information the folder held was exposed to him. "That we're done here," he finally said, voice a lot smaller than before. "There's handouts with the curriculum in the classroom. Go look at them, or don't. You're all dismissed. Except you, Midoriya. You're to head to the cafeteria as soon as possible." And with that, their teacher unceremoniously slinked away, probably to get another nap. Izuku collapsed to the ground, tears of joy flowing from his eyes as he stared up into the sky. "I didn't get expelled," he sobbed in relief. "I still have a chance." Funnily enough, Mineta was also doing the same exact thing. Uraraka stood over him worriedly, clearly unsure whether or not to try and help him up. You Midoriya-kun? She began hesitantly. Hey, are you okay? Do you, need help getting to the cafeteria? No one offered Mineta similar comfort, or at least attempts of comfort, but that was probably because he spent half the tests ogling Yaoyorozu and Ashido, aka Mem girl. Izuku shook his head slowly, wiping the leaky faucets that were his eyes as he pulled himself up to a seated position. I am okay. I'm just really relieved I didn't get kicked out on the first day. Uraraka laughed weakly as he stood up, though it was clear she wasn't laughing at him. She seemed almost as nervous as he was. Yeah, that was scary. She agreed, trailing behind him curiously. I'm happy you didn't get expelled though. I'm sorry I upset you earlier. That got him to stop in his tracks, turning back to look at her in confusion and a small, very, very infinitesimally small amount of hope. What? Seeing his attention fully fall on her, she puffed her cheeks up in determination. It was really, really cute. And that made Izuku blush. Thankfully, Uraraka didn't notice. She was too busy hyping herself up for a very sincere apology. Earlier, when we were both at the door to homeroom, Uraraka clarified, reaching out to grab his hands dramatically, which caused his face to explode in red, something she once again seemed to miraculously not notice. I said those things about you being lost, or maybe not belonging, and I didn't mean to be rude, but I saw you were upset, and I just wanted to say I'm really sorry. Izuku's eyes went wide, and then he burst into tears again. So, Midoriya-kun, Uraraka tried, walking beside him now as they approached the cafeteria. You never answered my question about why we're going to the cafeteria, or why you didn't use your quirk in the assessment test, or why you were there with lunch rush when the exams ended. He blushed shyly as they entered through the wide lunchroom doors, already making his way to the back. Sorry about that, Uraraka-san, he said sheepishly, but, all those questions kind of have the same answer, huh? Lunch rush saw them in no time, and eagerly waved Izuku over. He hurried behind the counter with a happy smile, already pulling a fresh hairnet out from somewhere, and donning it, restraining the fluff once more as he went to wash his hands. You're a cafeteria assistant? Uraraka asked in confusion, watching with interest as Izuku immediately got to work prepping his station behind lunch rush. Won't that be hard to balance with the hero course? Are you getting paid for that? Izuku shook his head with a sheepish smile, easily able to maintain eye contact with the girl while he chopped up a myriad of vegetables. Or, well, would have been able to maintain eye contact if he wasn't so shy, but that was neither here nor there. Well, I don't get paid, he explained, dicing an onion with pinpoint accuracy despite not sparing the poor vegetable a single glance. And my quirk, helps me be good at cooking. I still have to put in a lot of effort, but as long as I do that, everything comes out great. So when everyone came to the cafeteria after the entrance exams, they were kind of grading my own exam, huh? Uraraka's eyes widened in realization. You mean all that food we had, all that food that everybody was fighting over, was yours? He just nodded sheepishly, ducking his face in embarrassment as he continued his prep work. Why yeah, and everyone liked everything I made, so I passed. He smiled shyly as he thought about the frenzy that was kicked up by his cooking. I want to be a support hero like Lunch Rush Sensei, so I'll be spending at least a PRD a day with him, learning from the best. Lunch Rush gave them both a thumbs up before returning to his cooking, clearly in approval of Izuku's presence. Izuku couldn't help but wonder for a moment if it ever got lonely behind the cafeteria counter. Uraraka smiled at him. That's really cool, Midoriya-kun, she exclaimed, and your food was really good. I meant it when I said it was probably the best thing I've ever eaten. Her stomach rumbled in agreement, causing the poor girl to blush in embarrassment. Pretend you didn't hear that. Izuku laughed softly, blushing alongside her at the sound like it was music to his ears, which, weirdly enough, it kind of was. It's okay, Uraraka-san, that's why Lunch Rush Sensei and I are here. Order something, and I'll do my best to make sure you like it. She nodded eagerly as Lunch Rush pointed towards the counter, where a tablet sat for her to order. Her face fell the moment she approached. Izuku wasn't that great at reading people. Reading food was a different story, though if you give him a cut of meat, he could probably identify which country it was from, date of birth, distance from the equator, and its first name, but that was unimportant right now. But he could tell when something was wrong. Actually, Uraraka laughed nervously, looking anywhere but Izuku and Lunch Rush's way. Not that hungry. In fact, I should probably, be getting home now. Izuku blinked in confusion, a blink that only repeated once he heard her stomach growl again, betraying her true feelings. Uraraka-san? He tried, his voice hesitant. Is something wrong? This was the first time in a while that he had been excited to make something for someone. Uraraka had been so nice to him without even knowing his quirk, and he wanted to repay that kindness. Had he already screwed it up? Had any potential friendship been torpedoed by doing some nearly unnoticeable faux pas? Izuku bit his lip. He probably did. It wasn't like he had any friends beyond Katsuki, and again he didn't even really count, so he had probably already broken every rule of friendship decorum. Uraraka waved her hands rapidly in front of her, shaking her head. I'm fine. She insisted hurriedly, eyes trained firmly on the floor. I'm as sure your food is great, Midoriya-kun. Oh well, I know, I guess, since I had some after the exam, but, it's a little pricey, huh? Izuku and Lunch Rush both went still. They knew exactly what she was talking about. He was moving before his brain could catch up, but so was Lunch Rush. Izuku yelped as the hero practically threw him out of the kitchen, already moving to clean up his station despite Izuku having been planning the same thing. The trip to the ground was kinda painful, but it was what he had to endure as a chef. And Midoriya-kun? Uraraka gasped as he landed face-first at her feet, before quickly leaping back up with surprising fervor. Are you okay? He nodded, and with a confidence that he really shouldn't have had, he captured her hands in his own. Uraraka-san, he declared softly, getting down on one knee, my honor as a chef demands it. Please let me make you dinner. For free. This time, it was Uraraka who did the whole bursting into tears shtick. And floating away. It took a while to get her down from the ceiling. Are you sure about this, Midoriya-kun? Uraraka asked for the 50th time. I can't just ask you to make me dinner. Izuku ignored her, but only because if he responded, he would have stuttered so hard that he might have scared her away. He stirred the soup slowly in one hand, tossing the salad he had prepared in the other. The large pot at the back of the stove was boiling, its contents cooking to perfection while the dessert cooled in the fridge. He'd have time to finish it later. Uraraka watched him from his kitchen table. He could hear her stomach practically begging. It was the greatest compliment a chef could receive. After all, someone could lie to you, their stomach could not. She was more than a little flustered as he brought her to his apartment, and so was he. To be quite honest, this was just about the most embarrassing and kind of creepy thing he'd ever done, but he was determined to give her the best meal of her life. Uraraka had earned it, after all. She was nice to him. That meant he would do whatever it took to befriend the angel of a girl. The fact her smile was so cute had almost very little to do with it. Midoriya-kun, she stammered, trying to get his attention as he dropped the salad in favor of fishing out the main course from its pot. I mean, some of this stuff looks like it costs thousands of yen. I can't ask you to waste it all on. He whirled around to face her, his eyes burning with passion. Uraraka-san, food is made to be eaten. It's never wasted so long as the ingredients are put together with passion, and the final product is enjoyed by all who try it. And I don't want you to pay me back. I have more ingredients than I know what to do with. Things keep showing up in my fridge. Izuku's cheeks burned with embarrassment as his passionate speech continued, but it seemed to finally get through to his classmate, who, after blushing slightly, whether it be from the intensity of his words, the fact he was making her dinner, or the fact it was kind of hot in his kitchen, he would never know, finally nodded and relaxed into her seat. He smiled shyly to himself. That was good. The hard part was over. Thank you for also not commenting on the line of people outside my apartment building, Izuku mumbled as he pulled out the baked Alaska from his fridge as well as his trusty mini blowtorch to brown the meringue. People around here kind of know about my food, and they like to wait and see if I'll ever make them anything. No problem, Uraraka replied awkwardly, clearly equally flustered by the experience of having people cry with jealousy at her for simply walking with Izuku. Do you ever make them anything? Izuku sighed weakly. Yeah. All the time, he whispered, cheeks burning in a mix of embarrassment and skewed pride, that even if I know they have better things to do, and that they definitely have their own food, I feel kinda bad, and C can't really ignore hungry people when they're at the building's door. Uraraka's eyes sparkled. That's so sweet, she praised before laughing awkwardly. I hope you didn't just invite me over because you felt bad, though. She forced another laugh out, and Izuku instantly felt like the worst human being alive. No, not at all. He cried as he scampered to turn the oven off. I mean kind of. But you were also nice to me today. And most of the time people are only ever kind to me because they want me to make something for them. But you didn't know anything about me. And I don't have many friends aside from Kaken, and you apologized to me and were trying to comfort me after Ezo-sensei pretended to expel me. As he stammered out shaky reassurances to Uraraka, he spun around the kitchen like a tornado, putting the finishing touches on each and every course. The soup was poured into bowls, the salad garnished beautifully and plated with hands that only shook when he wasn't cooking, and the lobsters. Uraraka made a strange noise between a wheeze, a choke, and a gasp. Are those lobsters? Izuku tilted his head in confusion at her reaction. Why? Is something wrong? She looked at him like he'd grown a second head. Why are cooking me a lobster? She choked out, tears forming in her eyes. I had microwave ramen for dinner for the last 2 days. His eyes went wide. You're coming over for dinner every night, he said, surprising even himself with his boldness as he placed every last dish on the table, sitting down across from her with a shy smile. If that's okay with you, that is. Uraraka held her sobs in until the first sip of the soup. The tears didn't stop until the salad was gone. She started kissing him at the lobster. They never made it to the baked Alaska. It was love at first bite. For a majority of students in Class 1A, they felt an awkward silence permeate the room, making it difficult to comfortably speak up while they waited for whoever was teaching foundational heroics to arrive. This was to be expected on some level, as most of them had only just met the prior day, and they all needed some time to fully acclimate to each other before they were ready to start making casual conversation. This wasn't the case for everyone, however. In fact, a select few classmates had already become extremely close with each other, despite this being only the second day, which only added to the awkwardness for everyone else. Eventually, the silence became too much for one particular student, who cut through the tension like a knife in order to address the glaring elephant in the room. Okay, how the hell did this happen? Mineta gestured to the student he was seated behind. Or rather students, as Izuku wasn't exactly alone. Seated right next to him, holding his hand with an equally red blush on her face, was none other than Ochako Uraraka. I swear you two weren't dating yesterday. Okay, finally. We're bringing this up now. Mina groaned, as if she'd been waiting hours for the other shoe to drop. Bring up what now? Izuku asked, seemingly oblivious to the girl at his side. Together. Give me the deets. I mean, I don't think there are that many deets to give, Izuku hummed non-committally. I saw Uraraka dash. Ochako, she corrected. Alright, Ochako. I saw she couldn't afford lunch at the school cafeteria yesterday, so I invited her to my place so I could cook something for her. From there, well, I just couldn't resist, Ochako finished with a somewhat nervous giggle, making her affection for her now-boyfriend clear by resting her head on his shoulder, staring up at him dreamily. Naturally, more than a few jaws dropped at this revelation. Dang. You brought home a girl you just met? Respect. Toru nodded in approval, or at least Izuku assumed she did. I wasn't trying to end up with a girlfriend, but Izuku glanced at Ochako and found himself smiling at her mere presence, plus her adorable, adorable face. I'm not complaining. Truthfully, he hadn't thought much about entering a relationship, his mind usually occupied by thoughts of cooking and heroes and cooking-based heroes. But now that he had one, along with all the sweet, mushy feelings that came with it, he quickly warmed up to the idea, but not too quickly that it felt undercooked. He poured so much love into every one of his dishes, so what was the harm in letting others give some in return? It's about demon time you finally took a hint, Deku, Katsuki commented, drawing Ochako's attention. Deku, that's a cute name, Ochako hummed. Mind if I call you that too? See cute? The mere word made Izuku's heart throb. Sure, the nickname might have had some negative connotations when Katsuki first coined it, but they pretty much fizzled out when people started lining up at Izuku's doorstep to get a taste of his cooking. Sure, I don't mind. Great. Glad to hear it, Deku, she said in a sumptuously sweet tone that turned Izuku's cheeks an even deeper shade of red. In order to avoid literally all his blood rushing to his cheeks, he shifted his attention back to Katsuki. What do you mean by a hint, Kakin? A hint about what? Of course you don't know, he sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Deku, if I had a nickel for every girl that wanted to get in your pants, I'd have enough to buy you as my personal chef. Confusion found its way on Izuku's face, ignoring the fact that he wasn't the type to be bought out like that. You can't be serious. People like a guy who can cook, dumbass. And you spend like half your day cooking. Why you cook too? How come you didn't get any confessions? I did. But I turned them all down because I don't give a DMN about all that mushy crap. Well, maybe it's a good thing you were so dense. Ochako reminded Izuku of her presence with a light squeeze of his hand. If you weren't, I might not have been able to call dibs. Hey yeah, Izuku grinned, and the two shared a brief chuckle. Meanwhile, several of the other students were looking at the pair with varying levels of jealousy, both for Izuku and Ochako. Sheet. I didn't realize he was such a chick magnet, Kaminari internally fretted. It's always the plain-looking ones that get you. I need to step up my game. He turned to the closest girl and prepared to shoot his shot. Hey, you got any plans after school? Jiro just deadpanned at him. You're gonna have to try a bit harder than that. I didn't hear a no, he grinned ear to ear, knowing he had a semblance of a chance. Just then, all conversation was immediately halted when a large, towering figure quite literally burst into the room and was recognized immediately. Hello class. I am here to teach you foundational heroics. Needless to say, everyone went nuts at this news, as would anyone who just learned the heroic equivalent of Jesus Christ was their teacher. The number one hero laughed. I appreciate the enthusiasm, but we need to get to work here. It's time to don your hero costumes and begin the battle trials. The students all stopped at those words, a collective confusion sweeping through the crowd. Battle trials? To say Izuku was excited about this class would be the understatement of the century. Even if All Might was only his second favorite hero, he would never top Lunch Rush in that regard. He still considered himself a superfan, and having him as a teacher would be a dream come true. He may have been aiming to become a support hero rather than a combat-focused one, but it never hurt to learn those combat skills in case he found himself in a sticky situation. Even Lunch Rush found himself in his fair share of scrapes. But that wasn't the only thing he was excited about. Taking a look in the locker room mirror, he couldn't help but beam at how he looked in his hero costume. It was a pretty simple chef outfit, with a black hat and apron, but he thought the dark green accents really helped him stand out. Plus, he managed to replicate All Might's signature hair tufts with a large letter embroidered on the base of the hat. When he showed the design to his mom, she mentioned something about rabbits. He still didn't know what that was about, but now he found himself craving rabbit. Great costumes, everyone. You're all looking like true heroes already. All Might complimented the class as they all funneled out of the changing rooms. Now, for your first hero exercise, you'll be pitted against each other in teams of 2, 1 hero team and 1 villain team. The villain team will be given a bomb, and it's up to the heroes to dash. We all know how this goes by now. Just tell us the teams. Katsuki urged the hero on, wanting to both get to the good part and to avoid the unnecessary exposition. Oh, of course. All Might shuffled the note cards in his hand. The first match will have Midoriya and Yaoyorozu as the heroes, and Bakugo and Ojiro as the villains. At that, Izuku and Katsuki slowly turned toward one another, and an eager, almost feral grin split across the latter's face. It didn't take much thought for Izuku to know what was going through his head. Ever since they were kids, Katsuki had a bit of a rivalry with Izuku, always trying to one-up him at every turn. This competitive streak only increased when Izuku finally discovered his quirk, and the green-haired boy knew Katsuki would take this opportunity to settle the score. He knew for certain that he wasn't going to hold anything back, so he wouldn't either. 5 minutes later. "Kaken, what are you doing?" Izuku yelled at his friend, who had a crazed look in his eyes, the kind that told him he was about to do something extremely reckless. "What does it look like, nerd? I'm about to beat you." His finger hovered over the trigger, seemingly taking pleasure in drawing this encounter out for as long as possible. "Please, don't do this, Kaken." "Shut up. You're not talking your way out of this one." With one last laugh, he grabbed the dial and turned it up as high as it would let him. He was going all out on this attack. "Now, you don't need to tell the lobster to die. I think it's already dead." Izuku eyed his opponent's lobster, which rose to the top of the pot as the water was brought to a boil. "Also, boiling it like that is just gonna make it lose its flavor." "Well, we're on a time limit here. I don't have all day to cook this thing." "Then why'd you pick lobster of all dishes?" "This is why I made crab cakes." Izuku glanced down at his portable stove, and he took a whiff of the crabby goodness sizzling in the pan. "I'm just trying to gauge our judge's tastes here." He gestured to the judge in question, who looked on at the pair in abject confusion. Pardon me, but shouldn't we be fighting? Or at least looking for the bomb?" asked Momo, unsure of what exactly she had been dragged into. "We are fighting," Katsuki corrected. "This is just what we normally do," Izuku explained in a much more subdued tone. "We've had countless cook-offs in the past. And with these new, portable kitchen support items, we can have them wherever we want." "Not countless. The score is 62-3, Katsuki grunted with no small amount of displeasure. "But it's gonna be 62-4 after I win." Fortunately, even if Momo didn't rig the judging, she found the odds of Izuku winning were in her favor, and not just because of statistics. If Ochako's testimony was to be believed, this boy's cooking was on another level, which only piqued Momo's curiosity even further. Since she had both taken the recommendation exam and brought her own lunch yesterday, she had yet to taste the boy's food. But watching him cook now, she could definitely see the appeal. There was a certain charm to watching a skilled craftsman in his element, and Izuku was no different. She could tell just how much care he put into his cooking from his movements alone, and she found it quite the admirable trait, possibly even alluring in a sense. Still, was his food really good enough to net him a girlfriend? Could it even compare to the 5-star meals her chefs made for her every day? Or were Ochako's standards for good food depressingly low? Before she could think about it any further, the loud ringing of a fat gum-themed egg timer echoed across the hollow walls, which Izuku was quick to shut off. "Okay, time's up. Ready your dishes." "I'm going first." Katsuki shoved his plate into Momo's hands, and despite his somewhat rude demeanor, she had to admit it looked pretty appetizing. After producing a lobster cracker with her quirk, she opened it up and took a bite of the meat inside, humming in delight at the taste. Very good. It has a nice kick to it." The moment the words left her mouth, her cheeks involuntarily puffed up as a muffled bang rang out from inside her mouth, compelling her to spit out the meat she was still chewing. When she did, she was shocked to find that not only was smoke coming out of her mouth, but the meat had somehow become charred and black, as if it had spent too much time on the grill. What in the world? Oh god damn it. It happened again. Katsuki angrily pulled at his hair, his screams only increasing in volume when he actually managed to pull a chunk out. "I'm sorry. What just happened?" Momo asked, confused about the bitter aftertaste in her mouth. "Kaken's quirk lets him sweat nitroglycerin, and some of it ended up in the pot," Izuku casually explained. "Don't worry, it's non-toxic." Momo couldn't help the disgusted look she sent Katsuki's way. "That is very unsanitary. Cut me some slack. I didn't design this hero costume with cook-offs in mind." "Well, Kaken's fashion choices aside, now it's time to try my dish." As Izuku handed her a plate of crab cakes, She couldn't help but fixate on the cheery, welcoming grin he had on. It made her feel special, like it had been his life's goal to serve these crab cakes to Momo. Never had her personal chefs made her feel this way, and it was honestly something she could get used to. As for the crab cakes themselves, they looked unassuming at first glance, but that might have been Momo's preference for lobster talking. Anything was better than the culinary terrorist attack she had just been served, so she cut off a chunk of the crab cake and placed it into her mouth. But try as she might, no force in the universe could have prepared her for the spiritual journey that food would send her on. While her body was still inside the fake building, her soul had ascended to a higher plane, and she found herself in a picturesque sky, among a field of white clouds, a pair of golden gates towering over her. The gates opened up, revealing a large crab who she could only assume was God. The crab reached a claw out to her, bearing a friendly, comforting smile. "Come, Momo Yaoyorozu. Step foot in culinary heaven, and may your soul finally know peace." An otherworldly force compelled Momo to comply, and she wrapped her hand around the hook of the crab's claw, ready to be welcomed into paradise with open arms. And then she swallowed, and she suddenly found herself back inside the fake building. She was at a loss for words as well as a loss for thoughts. All she could do was stare blankly down at her plate of crab cakes, her mind struggling to catch up with her. Ugh, why does this always happen whenever someone eats your food? Katsuki dragged a tired hand down his face. Why can't I get that reaction? I keep telling you, Kaken. You need to make your dishes with love. That's overrated. Spite can taste just as good. Momo remained catatonic throughout the rest of the day, hardly able to take in the world around her as she went through the rest of her classes on autopilot. All she could focus on was the lingering taste of that first bite of crab cake dancing on her tongue. Part of her felt like she could eat nothing else for the rest of her life and still be satisfied with just that. However, a quirk like hers required a large intake of calories, meaning she absolutely could not skip dinner. But even as she sat across from her mother, a huge spread laid out between them, her eyes only focused on the takeout box Izuku had generously supplied her with. "Are you all right, Momo dear? You've hardly touched your food," her mother pointed out, finally snapping the girl back to reality. Apologies, mother. My mind's just been occupied with today's events." She reached over to her plate of sushi, procured by some of the finest chefs in Japan. As expected, it tasted like ash compared to the 6-star offering she'd had earlier. Consuming what could only be described as heaven on a plate, how was she expected to settle for anything less? The answer, she wasn't. Snatching up the takeout box, she proceeded to shovel the remaining crab cakes into her mouth in a very unladylike manner, which she couldn't care less about. Nor did she care about the sounds of pure delight that escaped her mouth as she ate, but her mother certainly did. "Momo, what on earth has got you acting this way? Did something happen at school today?" The girl paused for a moment at her mother's words, her cheeks flushing red with embarrassment. She knew this wasn't the kind of situation that could be explained with words, so she instead placed half a crab cake on a separate plate and slid it across the table to her mother. "What is this?" she asked rhetorically, her gaze shifting between the plate and her daughter. Is this really good enough to elicit such a reaction? I asked myself the same thing initially. Just give it a taste and I'm sure you'll understand. The woman didn't look convinced, but complied regardless. The moment a piece of crab meat landed on her tongue, her eyes grew wide and her vision unfocused, likely experiencing a similar sensation Momo did when she had her first bite. My word. She couldn't find the words to describe it, and instead shoved the rest of the crab cake into her mouth. Momo swore she could almost see her skin begin to glow with the pure joy she was experiencing at that moment. "Who made this?" she demanded, her eyes displaying a level of seriousness that was usually reserved for large business meetings. "Izuku Midoriya. He's in my class. I need you to make him an offer, Momo. I want him as our new head chef," she decided right then and there. Momo wouldn't lie and say the thought hadn't also crossed her mind, but she was a bit more hesitant to indulge in it. "I'm not sure how likely it is that he'll say yes. He's training to be a hero after all." In response, the older woman simply slid her personal credit card across the table, where it landed in Momo's hands. Make whatever offer you can. You know as well as I do that everyone has their price. That was something Momo couldn't deny. And while she still wasn't completely on board with the plan, the image of Izuku's cute, freckled face serving her breakfast each morning spurred to obey her mother's wishes. Momo came to school the next day prepared, showing off her more businesslike side with a firm stance and laser-focused gaze that urged everyone else in the hallway to clear a path as she made her way to the classroom. As soon as she opened the door, all eyes were on her, but her eyes were only on one. Midoriya, may I have a word with you? And me? Izuku straightened up in his seat, looking like he'd just gotten in trouble for something. Momo took note of this and slightly loosened her posture. Don't worry, this shouldn't take long. She already knew what she wanted to say. She'd been practicing her pitch since last night. Okay. He hopped out of his seat, and Momo led them out of the classroom, where everyone else was intimidated enough to let them have their piece. First of all, I'd like to preface that I greatly enjoyed your crab cakes during yesterday's exercise. They were some of the best things I've ever eaten. Izuku couldn't help but be shocked at the praise. He'd gotten countless compliments about his food before, but he felt it held a bit more weight from someone as wealthy as Momo, who'd already experienced the peak of culinary excellence. Really? Thank you. I hope you managed to finish the rest of it when you got home. I did, and my mother tried some as well. Her praises are similar to mine. Izuku's smile widened even further at the news. In fact, she wanted me to pass along an offer to you. She reached behind her back and pulled out a large, metal briefcase. How would you like to become the head chef for the Yaoyorozu family? The briefcase flew open with an audible cha-ching, and dozens of stacks of yen bills were presented to Izuku, almost overflowing with how many were packed in there. Momo had seen her parents use this trick on potential clients countless times before, and it had worked every time. Which was why she was so flabbergasted at the absolute indifference on Izuku's face. No thanks. He casually turned and strolled away, but he didn't get too far before Momo grabbed him by the shoulder and whipped him back around. I don't think you understand how much I'm offering. This is over 1 billion yen, and that's just your sign-on bonus. Oh, I know. He nodded, all too nonchalant given the amount of money being shoved in his face. I'm just not interested. I appreciate the offer, though. Momo furrowed her brow at him, his words sounding almost foreign to her. But are you certain? Listen, Yaoyorozu, I don't mean to be rude, but you're like the 5th billionaire to ask me to become their personal chef. I've gotten offers 10 times greater than what you have. Oh, Momo's face fell, the briefcase in her hand suddenly looking a lot smaller. I think I understand. Glad we're on the same page. Izuku nodded before rushing back into the classroom, hoping Aizawa didn't count him as absent yet. Momo, meanwhile, was already dialing her contacts, ready to put her backup plan into motion. Perhaps she had been a bit foolish to think 1 billion yen was enough, and while she hated being seen as some snobby rich girl who endlessly flaunted her wealth, this was one of the rare instances where her reputation was of lesser importance. Lunchtimes in the cafeteria were always endlessly chaotic for Izuku, but in a good way. While cooking at home had a certain cozy charm to it, dealing with the lunch rush alongside lunch rush gave him a challenge he could really sink his teeth into. UA had incredibly high standards when it came to their meals, and not only did Izuku have to cook for hundreds of hungry mouths each day, he also had to keep track of their individual dietary and quirk restrictions. But despite the entire juggling act he had to put up with, he managed to face that challenge head-on, throwing out specialized meals like a human machine gun. Amajiki, here's your all-meat entree. Shoji, here's your no-meat entree. Koda, here's your less-than-no-meat entree, aka vegan. Vlad King, here's your blood-based entree. Ashido, here's your acid-based entree. Nizu, here's your pellet-based entree. Kamori, here's your mushroom-based entree. Yaoyorozu, here's your impossibly high-calorie. He trailed off upon realizing the girl in question was nowhere to be found. Yaoyorozu? Are you here? Your food's gonna get cold. I'm right here, Midoriya. At the sound of Momo's voice, Izuku turned to the nearest entrance, just in time to see a gold-plated yacht crash through the doors, which was being held up by dozens of sharply dressed men and women while Momo sat on the bow. And I've come bearing another offer for Dash. No, Izuku cut her off, not even bothering with the pleasantries. Momo squeezed her mouth shut, having been thrown off her entire speech. You haven't even let me make my offer. I don't need to hear your offer to know that gold can't float. It's not real gold, Midoriya. It's just painted to look that way. Plus, it comes with your own personal staff. She gestured to the group holding the yacht up, who all waved at him. All Izuku could do was pinch the bridge of his nose in exasperation. Look, even if it was gold, I still wouldn't take the deal, not even if you gave me the most valuable hero merchandise on the planet. And besides, even if I'm not your personal chef, I still made you lunch. Turning his smile back on, he presented Momo with her specially made entree, which she had to admit looked delectable. But still, the prospect of having him around for the 2 other meals of the day was simply too enticing. He might have said he wouldn't accept any offers, but in doing so, he might have just given her an idea that was sure to work. It may have been too early to tell, but Izuku doubted he'd ever get tired of holding hands with his girlfriend. It was amazing how her mere presence turned any given moment from good to great, especially right now. As the 2 of them walked across Yue's courtyard after a tough day of classes, having her by his side made it feel all the more worth it. What do you want to do today, Deku? She asked, to which Izuku gave a thoughtful hum. I don't know. He hadn't put much thought into possible date ideas. He knew couples normally went to cafes and restaurants. His own apartment-turned-restaurant was a semi-popular date spot, but he always found it weird to be on the other side of the service industry. Plus, it wasn't like he could cook for all their dates, so he wanted to branch out into something non-food related. Do you have any preferences? I don't mind as long as it's with you, she said so smoothly and naturally that it had to have been rehearsed. How else would someone be able to spout such a fitting line without skipping a beat? Naturally, Izuku couldn't help but turn away as he tried to hide his blushing face. If that's the case, then maybe we could go to the park or some? He trailed off as his eyes landed on a sight that was as unexpected as it was completely expected. You've got to be kidding me. Ochako saw it too, though her reaction was far less deadpan than Izuku's. What's with all the hero merchandise? She asked as she tilted back to take in the full magnitude of the collection of merch before her. Impressive, is it not? Momo stepped out from behind the pile, bearing a satisfied grin. I've gathered some of the most valuable pieces of All Might, Lunch Rush, and Fat Gum merchandise known to man. All in mint condition, mind you. Izuku focused on the crown jewel of the collection adorning the top of the pile. Is that a life-sized golden Fat Gum statue? I didn't even know they sold those. They don't, the statue answered, who was actually the man himself. She just paid me to paint myself gold and stand still for a while. And all this, plus my prior offers, could be yours if you just agree to be my family's personal chef, Momo offered once again, eliciting an offended gasp from Ochako. So that's why you're doing this? You want him all to yourself, don't ya? Well, guess what? I already called dibs, YC. Slipping into her Mia accent, she rolled up her sleeves and shifted into a fighting stance. Though she had made it clear that she was ready and willing to resort to violence, Izuku prevented things from escalating by placing a hand on her shoulder. It's okay, Ochako. I can handle this. He aimed a fierce glare at Momo, and Ochako could immediately tell how serious he was. Yeah, I'll leave ya to it then. Mess her up for me. She landed a good luck kiss on his cheek before sneaking behind the pile of merchandise, secretly checking to see how much they were worth. Now that the 2 were alone, Momo allowed her professional demeanor to waver slightly, some of her internal doubts seeping into the nervous look she sent Izuku. I hope you don't plan on engaging in a battle with me. I'm sure we can talk this out in a friendly, sophisticated manner. Yaoyorozu, he began, his expression unreadable. Do you know why I cook? To be a hero, I presume. Okay, so you do know. And I'm sure you'd also know that being your personal chef would conflict with that. Evidently, yes. Her normally perfect posture began to waver as she slumped over with guilt. I tried to tell Mother, but she was insistent I make my pitch. Okay, so she's the one to blame here. His expression softened at that, far less frustration aimed at Momo, which she appreciated. But that's not the only reason why I cook. Here. He pulled out a dumpling from his pocket and placed it in the girl's hand. Try this. She had the food for less than a second before shoving it into her mouth, and an unbelievably satisfied smile broke out across her face. She was so caught up in the heavenly taste that she hardly noticed Izuku pulling out his phone until she caught the flash of his camera. See this? He showed her the photo of her initial reaction. That big, beautiful smile? That's the reason why I cook. I want to bring smiles to as many as possible, especially when they need it most. But if I ever became someone's personal chef, if I only limited myself to cooking for the highest bidder, I'd never be able to achieve my dream. Momo inhaled a silent breath, momentarily taken aback at his words. I think I understand, she told him. I think I owe you an apology, Midoriya. Never have I considered that your motivations for cooking would be so noble. I can say with confidence you have the heart of a true hero. Oh, I wouldn't go that far. He couldn't help but blush at the praise. But it's true. It's not just your food that makes you special, it's the way you cook, how you look like you're enjoying every step of the process, and the sheer excitement on display when you serve it to others. She felt something in her chest rise as she took Izuku's hands in hers. Yes, I may have enjoyed your cooking, but I also enjoyed you. Just as you're driven to see others smile, I've found myself yearning for yours as well. Izuku gasped, feeling his heart swell up with a torrent of emotions. He always paid attention to how he carried himself when serving others, but to hear someone pay just as much attention and actually admire him for it, it filled a hole in his heart he never realized was even there. Yarozu I-. What the hell? The moment was instantly shattered when Ochako made her presence known, steam rising off her head as she stormed toward Momo. I leave for 5 minutes and you're already trying to make a move on him? It was only then Momo realized everything she had just said, her face going atomically red as a result. Uraraka, I didn't mean to. Really, it just came out. But, I can make it up to you, she blurted out. When she saw the other girl raise a curious eyebrow, she figured she ought to continue. Your family runs a construction business, right? I'm sure I can pull some strings and get them some high-quality work. Okay, fine, she nodded, the raging flame within her immediately dampening. You can date him too. Wait, what? Both Izuku and Momo shouted simultaneously. Yeah, you seem pretty nice, and your feelings seem genuine enough, plus you're loaded as hell, she shrugged. And I'm sure Deku can make enough servings for the both of us. That is, if he's all right with that. Izuku found himself panicking as he found himself in the sights of 2 beautiful girls, and he nervously spouted the first thing to come to mind. Sure. Why not? Before he could register what just came out of his mouth, he suddenly found himself in a crushing hug from Momo, who managed to scoop him up as she excitedly hopped up and down like a little girl on Christmas morning. Oh, thank you so much. I promise you won't regret it. I can cover all our dates, and Uraraka's too if she'd like. And you're both always welcome at my house whenever you'd like. Of course, you'd have to meet Mother, but I'll be sure to establish boundaries with her. And perhaps you could also accompany me to the upcoming gala. I'll be sure to. As she rambled on about all the fun things they do as a couple, Izuku simply stared out into the distance, his brain struggling to catch up. It hadn't even been a week since he got a girlfriend, and now he suddenly has a second one. Well, I guess there are worse problems to have, he eventually decided, quickly mellowing out at the idea. Should be fine as long as I stick with 2 girlfriends, not like a third one would even confess to me. He internally laughed at the absurdity at the thought. At least, he assumed it was absurd at the time. Izuku stirred slowly, the first beams of sunlight landing squarely on his face and practically forcing him to get up. He groaned in irritation, reaching out to rub his eyes, or maybe slam a pillow over his face, he hadn't decided, but he found his arms were restrained by something. He cracked one bleary eye open in confusion, and his blood ran cold, even as his face exploded in heat. Ochako was sleeping on him. Izuku died and went to heaven right there. He felt his soul begin to leave his body, towards the bright light straight ahead that was practically calling his name. And then Ochako shifted slightly, a gentle whine leaving her lips as she clung to him tighter. His soul fell back into his body with a soft gasp, and the bright light above him faded away. He looked down at the girls splayed across him as they snuggled on his couch. Heaven must have been nice, but this was hard to beat. Even if he was doing his best impression of a strawberry as she clung to him, doing her best to ignore the sunlight filtering its way in through the blinds. Ochako's face scrunched up into the cutest pout he'd ever seen before she hid it by nuzzling his neck. Izuku was choking. He was a chef and he was choking and he wasn't even eating anything. His brain rapidly tried to rationalize the situation. Cuddling with a girl. It was Ochako. That made sense. They were dating. Why was she at his house though? Dinner. Izuku blinked slowly as his memory returned to him. He had invited Ochako and Momo to come over for dinner. What with the whole cup of noodles a night diet his first girlfriend had been trying, something he would never ever accept one of his friends having, let alone one of his girlfriends. Momo also secretly wrote a check for a few billion yen and shoved it in the girl's jacket pocket, but Izuku could keep it a secret. Not that Ochako wouldn't instantly realize where it came from. She had reluctantly admitted to him that her family was the opposite of well-off, which had led to him ardently declaring that she simply must join him for dinner every night, and allow him to both feed her all the delicious food she had missed out on in life as well as show off a little bit. Don't judge him. It wasn't every day you had a cute girl watching in awe as you juggled apples only to toss them all into the air and slice them perfectly into the shapes of little animals before they hit the plate on the way down. Okay, well, it could have been every day for him if he went out and chose to try and impress people, but that wasn't his intent. He wasn't going to do all that for someone he didn't care a lot about, even if it was relatively easy at this point. He'd rather not be all showy and pretend like he was cool unless he wanted to really impress someone, and Ochako was someone he was definitely willing to impress. Fat gum too. He asked if he could have something to eat after letting Momo paint him gold and stand still for a while. Izuku felt a sense of duty at the request, and considering he wanted to open a restaurant that catered to heroes, this was as good a test run as any, and so what was going to be a spectacular evening with his girlfriends turned into a spectacular evening with his girlfriends and Fat Gum. He might have been even more impressed than Ochako and Momo with the tricks Izuku did with his knife. The man nearly fell out of his chair when he pulled out the hibachi grill. Anyways, to make a long story short, his girlfriends and Fat Gum made short work of his fridge, but it was fine since it always ended up restocked to the brim the following morning. Izuku was pretty sure rich people snuck in and bought him groceries. Either way, Momo eventually had to leave with a box of takeout, 3 guesses why, and as fine as Fat Gum probably would have been with staying overnight to have breakfast cooked for him, Izuku felt a little weird about having a grown man sleep over in his mom's apartment. So that just left Izuku and Ochako. They hung out for a while, went to the couch to watch a movie together, and definitely not make out. And fell asleep together. This was bad. His mom definitely took pictures of them together when she got home. Ochako began to stir in his arms, purring softly as she nuzzled his neck. "Morning, Deku," she murmured softly, smiling against his skin. "You're so warm." "Tea, that's probably from my blush," he whispered back, his face as red as their classmate Kirishima's hair. Gee, good morning." She giggled softly at his stammering, craning her head up to peck his cheek before nestling it right back in the crook of his neck as her eyes fluttered back shut. Izuku blushed like a maiden at the action, his body feeling like it was floating away, and no, Ochako was not using her quirk on him. "You're so comfy. I'm so glad we don't have to get up anytime soon." Her eyes shot open, throwing herself off Izuku and onto the floor, as she gasped. "We're going to be late to class." She looked around in a panic before her eyes found the clock on the wall, but that only made things worse. "It starts in half an hour. Aizawa-sensei is going to kill us. And then expel us. And then kill us again." They both scrambled up in a hurry, Izuku to his room for his uniform and Ochako to also his room for her uniform. They changed in separate rooms. They brushed their teeth in record time. He didn't ask where Ochako had suddenly gotten her own from, throwing their shoes and jackets on in a flurry of movement. Ochako did his tie for him, which was very sweet considering the lack of time they had, though he wished she didn't do it so tight that he was almost choking. But right as she lunged for the door, Izuku grabbed her by the shoulder. "You can't leave yet?" he exclaimed. "I haven't made breakfast." "There's no time for breakfast," Ochako shouted, pulling at his arm insistently, with her pinky raised in the air for good measure. Izuku's blood ran cold at her words. He went still, stopping in his tracks as Ochako realized something was wrong. "That there's always time for breakfast?" he whispered, voice dangerously low. "It's the most important meal of the day, Ochako." She wasn't budged, despite the squeak of fear she let out at his icy tone, tugging insistently after she let herself have a moment to shiver. "We can eat later. I'm still full from dinner." "That's not." A loud horn from outside caused both of them to freeze. Now, considering Izuku lived in an apartment with dozens, if not hundreds, of other people, and it was an early weekday morning, that horn could have been directed towards literally anyone in the building, on the street, or anyone else. But Ochako and Izuku were in a story. And Izuku was the main character. So they both knew that horn was for them. "We're going," Ochako exclaimed, dropping her pinky onto his arm and causing him to begin to float. "You can lecture me about breakfast later." Being weightless was cool. Being dragged down several flights of stairs through the air by his girlfriend was less cool. She stumbled out of the apartment building, carrying Izuku by the arm like a hyper-realistic balloon behind her, who was trying not to puke, and froze. There was a limo out front, with Izuku's face on a flag that hung from the back of it. Because of course there was. Despite the insanity of the situation, Ochako grinned. There was only one person who would bring a limo to Izuku's house, after all. Oh crap. That might actually be untrue, considering the way Izuku talked about rich people begging him to cook for them. But she was already 80% of the way to the vehicle, so it would be pretty weird if she stopped now, so she opened the door anyway. And breathed a sigh of relief. Because it wasn't a creepy rich guy or old widow who greeted them in the back seat. It was Momo. "Hello, you too," she greeted with a smile, though it quickly transformed into a look of confusion as Ochako dragged him into the limo. That look of confusion evolved into one of concern as his head banged against the door when she tugged him through. Izuku grunted in pain and Ochako immediately let go, allowing his body to float into the back where the girls were. "Release," she whispered guiltily, tapping her fingers together to bring gravity back to her boyfriend. Unfortunately, she forgot that he was still floating, and so the trip down to the floor of the limo was just as pleasant as... Izuku gasped softly as Momo caught him, pulling him into her arms before he would have splatted against the ground, and instead went face first into her chest. "So, goodness Izuku, are you all right?" Momo asked gently, stroking his hair with dainty, caring fingers. "You look frazzled." Izuku mumbled, face pink as he stared up at his other girlfriend. Momo gasped, somehow able to understand his complaints perfectly despite his face being crushed by her momos. "Oh my! You slept in and Ochako didn't allow you to make breakfast. How terrible! We would have been late." The gravity girl cried in protest, crossing her arms under her chest as she pouted cutely. "I had to take charge of the situation." The black-haired heiress nodded understandably, still keeping Izuku's head right where it was. "I understand," she said softly, a small smile forming on her lips. "But lucky for us, I have a solution to this conundrum." "Esmeralda." The woman in the driver's seat nodded without a word, slamming her foot on the brakes at the same time as she hit a certain button on the dash. The limo began to rumble softly as the plush, carpeted floor began to shift, opening up as an entire hibachi stove began to rise up from the floorboards. Izuku blinked slowly. He knew Momo's family was loaded, but he didn't realize they were, defy the laws of physics and the Japanese automobile industry, loaded. Momo procured a stylish cloth headband from her arm, dangling it playfully in front of Izuku's eyes. "Whenever you're ready, chef." As the trio walked into 1A, stomachs satisfied and lips, specifically Izuku's, kissed, laughing playfully and with Momo and Ochako holding him close, they were not prepared for the reception they were about to receive. "Are you shitting me?" Mineta screeched, bloody tears of jealousy running down his cheeks as he and the rest of the class stared slack-jawed at the cuddle puddle. 2 girlfriends? And one of them is the hottest girl in class. Dude, teach me your ways. Kaminari practically begged, throwing himself out of his seat to grovel at Izuku's feet, hands clasped desperately. I need to know. Is it possible to learn this power? Izuku, Ochako, and Momo stared blankly down at him. What? They're jealous you have a harem, Deku. Katsuki grunted, though he seemed to be one of the few people completely nonplussed by the situation. We're not a... Sit down. He and his girlfriends quickly found their seats, not wanting to be the target of the homeless-esque man's ire. Aizawa's dry, flat tone cut through any and all chitter-chatter as he stepped into the classroom, his face portraying a mix of exhaustion and resignedness that Izuku didn't think anyone could match. Or maybe he was just hungry. Izuku found that food solved a lot of problems. Maybe his homeroom teacher could use something better than those processed, dyed, filthy pieces of chemical waste he called jelly packets. I've reviewed the footage from your battle trials yesterday, the man continued, and you all did a generally okay job for your first times. Midoriya, Bakugo, I don't know what you two were doing, but don't do it again. That exercise was meant to be a guide to training, not cooking. Izuku gasped in indignation. But Aizawa-sensei, he cried out in protest, cooking is training? How will I ever be able to feed hundreds of disaster victims under pressure if I can't make a proper crab cake dish within 15 minutes? Yeah, teach. Bakugo practically snarled in agreement from behind him, and if I can't beat Deku at his own game, how else am I gonna be the #1 hero? Aizawa just stared at them both for a moment, before muttering something that sounded suspiciously like, I don't get paid enough for this under his breath and sighing. Okay then. Whatever. That's not important today, class. We're dealing with something much more serious. Everyone essayed in a collective breath. If it was serious to Aizawa, then we'll be electing your class representatives. The class collectively collapsed in their seats. A few souls were currently leaving bodies. That's something normal. Pick someone to be the class representative and vice representative by the end of homeroom, he said simply, before curling up behind the lectern and going straight back to sleep. The class all stared at each other for a moment, incredulous. Before, I should be class rep. It was anarchy. Ooh. Make me class rep. Hagakure cheered. Kirishima snorted and shook his head, hand raised high. Make me class rep. It would be an honor. And manly. If you extras don't make me class rep, I'll kill you. 3 guesses as to who said that. If I'm made class rep, I'll make the girls' skirts a minimum of 5, 6 inches shorter. 3 guesses as to who said that. It seemed like just about everybody wanted to be it, except for Todoroki, who was staring flatly ahead at the board, completely unbothered by the chaos around him, and Izuku. Momo noticed his lack of enthusiasm, nudging his side as she leaned over to him. Not interested? He shrugged as Ida stepped up and helped them choose on voting for their representative, a decision which likely saved a lot of time and screaming from Katsuki. I've kind of got a busy schedule these days. It would be cool to be class representative, but I wouldn't be upset if I didn't. Plus, I get enough attention from everyone already. His girlfriend nodded thoughtfully at his words. I wasn't going to compete with you for the nomination, since you would have been a shoo-in, but in that case. She leant in, her lips nearly brushing against his ear as she whispered. Vote for me and I'll. This content has been cut due to excessive horny. Izuku stared dumbly ahead as Ochako sat him down at their lunch table, completely lost for words, and only partially due to what Momo had said to him. 4 votes. He whispered in disbelief as his girlfriend sat beside him, equally confused, and slightly lost on why Izuku kept being unable to look Momo in the eye in Ochako's case. I didn't even vote for myself. Well, I voted for you, Deku. Ochako said cheerfully, leaning her head against his shoulder. Momo did too, so that makes 2, right? The aforementioned heiress coughed into her fist awkwardly. Not quite, she trailed off slowly before brightening a tad. Though I'm slightly disappointed with the result, I don't think there's a better person for me to serve as vice representative under. He smiled bashfully at her. Thanks, Momo, he whispered, only to freeze at the slightly scary look she gave him. "Anytime," she whispered back flirtatiously, "and just remember, I didn't have to win for—" "Excuse me." A stiff, slightly louder than necessary voice interrupted, saving Izuku from having to explain just what Momo offered to him in the middle of class to both the reading audience at home and Ochako. "May I sit here? Or is this a couples, thruples, apologies, only table?" Izuku's face flushed with embarrassment at Ida's wording, though he was pretty sure the engine-legged boy didn't mean any harm with the words. I don't mind," he replied awkwardly, not yet used to conversations that weren't about cooking or, strangely enough, romance. "Hi, Ida." Ochako smiled welcomingly at him. "Sure." She even had the social awareness to stop snuggling up to his side, and even though Izuku missed the contact, he couldn't say that it wasn't warranted, given he wasn't trying to make Ida uncomfortable. Momo held no such reservations and was content to leave her arm wrapped snugly around Izuku's torso, her hair splaying into his own as she nodded her consent. Ida gave her a slight sideways look. He couldn't really blame the guy for that one, before he shook it off, smiling at the trio as he sat opposite them. "Well, I believe congratulations are in order, class representative, vice representative," he said with a slightly disappointed smile, "though I suppose you earned it. I can't say it wasn't a little disheartening to not receive a single vote." "Oh yeah." Ochako snapped her fingers in realization. "That's true. Well, if it's any consolation, I would have voted for you if Deku weren't here. You look the part really well. You really fit the whole glasses why important man vibe." Ida blinked owlishly at her, looked back at Momo, who was now playing with Izuku's fingers, smiling contently, and then at Izuku. Izuku smiled politely. "Alright," Ida replied. Thank you, Uraraka-san. I just figured that Midoriya-san was, more suited to the position." Momo hummed slowly. "Well, that's 2 votes for Izuku, and 2 votes for me. Considering everyone else seemed to really want to vote for themselves, I'm not sure where those extra 3 came from." "Todoroki-san seemed like he didn't care," Izuku pointed out, "and I don't think he'd vote for me, since we never talked. Also, I don't think he likes me. He's never tried any of my food for lunch yet. But if he voted for Momo, then I don't know how." "I voted for you." Forehead swiveled as one as Mineta called out to him from 2 tables over, leaning back in his seat as best he could, while also probably trying to check Momo and Ochako out. "I knew I didn't really have a chance without Kaminari voting for me, so I figured it would be better to vote for you instead. You're pretty cool, Midoriya, and you're really nice." Despite what little he knew about the shorter boy being relatively negative, it had only been 2 days and Momo had already told him plenty about the purple-haired boy's perverted actions. Izuku felt his heart warm up at the boy's words. "Thanks, Mineta-san," he called back earnestly. Also, you have a harem," Mineta continued on, completely steamrolling his attempt at a friendly reply, "and so you might install those skirt rules for me. Also, don't supporters get a say in the figurehead's leadership? Or get handouts back? I'm not saying I want one of your girlfriends, but can you get me a girlfriend for myself? Or at least teach me how to get a harem?" All goodwill dried up instantly. Izuku looked away, ashamed he'd even tried. "Pervert!" Ochako called out angrily, sticking her tongue out at Mineta before returning her gaze to the table. "What a JRK!" Momo nodded in agreement, her nose upturned at his vulgar attitude. "A real brute. I can't help but wonder how he got into the hero course." "Me neither." Izuku blinked in surprise as yet another relatively unfamiliar face joined the table, this time belonging to the one and only Ishido Mina, who he was really trying hard not to refer to as Miming Girl anymore. "Hey guys. I heard you guys crap-talking Mineta." She greeted them all with a bright, friendly smile as she sat down next to Ida. "Mind if I sit here?" Ida bristled at the sudden intrusion, but was quick to relax. "Welcome, Ishido-san. We're pleased to have you for lunch today." "Yeah." Ochako agreed eagerly, even though Ida said it like a robot. Ida sputtered like a faulty engine at the accusation, and all 3 girls couldn't help but giggle at the poor boy's predicament. Izuku felt a little bad, since he'd been made fun of before, but it seemed like there was a difference in how he used to be treated due to his perceived quirklessness and the harmless banter going on at Ida's slight expense. Still, Izuku wasn't going to let anyone be teased that. "It's nice of you to sit with us, Ashido-san," he agreed. "How are you?" "I'm good." Ashido flashed him a toothy grin, and as she suddenly reached over the table, Izuku had no time to respond before her hand was in his hair. Ida gasped. Momo gasped. Ochako just looked kinda surprised. "Wow, your hair really is as fluffy as it looks." Mina giggled. "What's your secret? Oh shoot. I probably shoulda asked before doing this. Sorry. Wanna feel my hair in apology?" Woo? Izuku asked dumbly, completely lost for words as Mina continued to pretty much pet him. "I don't have a secret?" "Pissage." Mina blew off his response easily, now practically crawling on the table to get a better petting angle on his luscious locks. "No way. This is way fluffier than mine, and I work for hours to get it this bouncy and light." She finally peeled away from his hair, either uncaring or unnoticing of the way his face was now almost as pink as her own, still maintaining her upbeat demeanor. "So, what's for lunch?" "Mina's hungry." "I forgot I had to cook." Izuku threw himself out of his seat with a speed that would have made Ingenium jealous, flying over the barrier that separated the kitchen from the rest of UA's cafeteria while flipping out his apron and hairnet. Lunch Rush raised his head in confusion at the commotion, before shrugging and going back to meal prep. Should we remind him that Snipe-sensei let us out early, and that the lunch PRD hasn't even started? Ochako shook her head quickly at Ida's question, stifling a giggle. "No, it's okay. He cooks better under pressure." Izuku smiled as he worked through the line of hungry schoolmates beside Lunch Rush, handing out orders with a pep in his step. They had mostly finished the making aspect of the day for food, though, and were now just making sure everyone got what they ordered and had ample time to eat before the PRD ended. "Deku!" His eyes lit up at the sound of Ochako calling his nickname, and he couldn't hide his excitement as she, Momo, Ida, and Ashido came up, next in line for their orders. "Hi everyone. I hope you all like what I've prepared for you today." He quickly pulled out a large tray with 4 identical platters, each one covered by a silver cloche that hid the contents within. While Izuku would never make low-quality food for anyone, Quirk or not, it was simultaneously true that these 4 dishes clearly took a little extra effort. "Let's see," he began quickly, pulling one of the dishes off at random and placing onto a smaller tray before handing it to Ida, a hearty house salad filled with nuts, grilled chicken, and my own dressing, a perfectly glazed salmon on cedar wood. Yes, the wood is important. No, you don't have to eat it. Yes, you can eat it if you want, with a side of dark chocolate oranges and Greek yogurt for dessert. I didn't even order anything. Or tell you my preferences." Ida stared gobsmacked at Izuku as he listed off the list of things he'd made for him, before slowly lifting the cloche off to prove he wasn't currently getting played for another joke. He nearly dropped the tray. The smell was that good. "No!" Izuku screamed at the thought of wasting food, all joy evaporating from his face in an instant. "Go sit down. Then you can eat." It wasn't very difficult to shoo Ida away at that point, and he quickly turned to face the remaining girls with a new, bright, beaming smile. "Momo, for you, I have a true meal." He nabbed the biggest platter off the tray, handing it to her with a slightly shy smile. "1 bowl of sticky rice to go with your tuna sushi, 1 mixed cup of raisins and dried cranberries, 1 French onion soup, and your 32-ounce steak, cooked to medium well." Now, normally such an inordinate amount of food being offered to a girl would get you slapped, or at least a dirty look, based on the implications of it, but Momo wasn't just any girl. She was a girl who created cannons with her quirk. And cannons cost calories. "If I wasn't already your girlfriend, I'd be begging you to go out with me right now," Momo said, her eyes lighting up as she accepted her meal from Izuku with a grateful smile. "I'll be eagerly awaiting your return to the table, my sweet." Before she could even turn her head all the way, Ochako was there, pupils dilating as she realized what Izuku had most likely made for her. "Give it to me, Deku," she whispered, clasping her hands together as though she were praying. "What did you make?" "Stuffed pheasant." "I love you so much," Ochako babbled, tears of joy streaming down her face as she accepted her tray. Rich people food. Food I've never even heard of. Animals they eat in France. You're the sweetest boy ever, Deku. Even though it was definitely against some hygiene rules, Ochako leant over and kissed him on the cheek. It clearly took a lot for her to not leap over the counter and start skiing face with him, so he accepted just the peck with a bashful smile. I'm gonna go eat this, she declared, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, and then you're gonna come over to the table and I'm gonna cuddle you and tell you it was perfect. Got it, Deku? Got it, Ochako? Izuku couldn't help but feel a warmth in his chest as she walked away abruptly. It might have been rude to some people to leave them hanging mid-sentence, but for a chef it was quite an honor to have someone that confident your food would be perfect. Ashido shifted forwards curiously, bouncing on her heels with her hands behind her back. Say, Midori, she began coyly, not that I'm complaining, but why did you make me and Ida special dishes? I get it for Momo and Ochako, but… because you two sat with us. Izuku replied, suddenly feeling like he might have messed up. I figured we were friends, and friends do nice things for each other, and you came up and sat and talked with everyone even though I'm not really sure about what the hair-touching thing was about. And I didn't want to send the wrong message by making Ochako and Momo food and not making you and Ida something. Whoa! Ashido interrupted dramatically, hold your horses, Midori. I can't think that fast. He felt his face flush in embarrassment. Oh, sorry. I tend to mumble sometimes. His apologies were waved off with a snort. Don't worry about it. Ashido giggled. It's kind of cute. And thanks for making a special lunch for me. I really appreciate it. I knew I made a good decision when I voted for you for class rep. Izuku blinked in surprise as he handed her her tray. You voted for me, Ashido-san? Why? She just shrugged. I dunno. I didn't think I'd be a good fit. You're really nice and somehow got 2 girlfriends in almost as many days of school, so either you're the main character or you're, like, the best guy ever. I dunno about all that, he whispered bashfully, suddenly very shy in the face of the pink ball of energy in front of him. Anyways, your lunch. I made a frozen pineapple and mango smoothie, as well as a vinaigrette coleslaw mixed with some lemon-grilled asparagus and a berry compote with lemon-lime zest. Unlike the others, who had returned to their seats before eating and enjoying, based on the summness Izuku could hear from Ochako, the temptation was too great for Ashido to resist even a few seconds of abstinence from her specialty meal. The pink-skinned girl set the tray right on down in front of Izuku, a playful gleam in her dark eyes. Citrus compote? She repeated eagerly as she grabbed a hold of her spoon. Now this I gotta try. The moment her spoon hit her tongue, she froze. Her body went rigid then loose again, eyes flickering between Izuku, the compote, and their table several times over as a flavor party exploded in her mouth. Midori, Ashido leaned forward, whispering conspiratorially to him as she beckoned him in close. You know how you have 2 girlfriends? Izuku couldn't help but pause in confusion at her words. Yes. Ashido's hand shot out like a snake, nabbing his collar snugly in her grasp as she gave him a look that was downright predatory. Make that 3. And then she kissed him. On his lips. Like she owned them. Alarm bells went off, but not in his head. Just inside the cafeteria. For some reason, not a single person got up from their seat. All right, class. Aizawa stood to address his students as they waited outside the building in their hero costumes. I'm sure many of you were still shaken up by yesterday's security breach, but we've got it all under control, so try not to let it affect your performance during today's hero exercise. If anything, it should motivate you to do better. Izuku would have liked to be motivated if he only knew what the heck his teacher was talking about. Wait, security breach? Was I supposed to know about that? Yeah, someone had to fill me in too. Mina very casually slid up to him, making sure their shoulders touched. Apparently the UA barrier broke down during lunch and the press triggered the alarm. How did I miss that? Izuku knew he tended to get in the zone while cooking, but he also made sure to pay attention to alarms, or else most of his dishes would burn up in the oven. Probably because you were occupied with something else. Seizing the opportunity, Mina leaned in to reenact the kiss she and Izuku had shared the prior day. Needless to say, it was just as magical the second time. How wow! Izuku gaped like a fish moments before being fried on a skillet, momentarily oblivious to the series of exasperated looks from those just hearing about his relationship upgrade. Okay, 3 girlfriends now. Cool. Mineta threw his hands in the air. I gotta learn cooking fast, because at this rate, there won't be any girls left by the end of the year. I promise I'm not doing this on purpose, Izuku tried to assure them. I just happened to meet some of the kindest, sweetest, most amazingest girls ever in a short amount of time. All woo Deku. Touched by his earnestness, Ochako ran up to hug her boyfriend, shamelessly nuzzling her cheek against his. By now, the bus had arrived, and the class continued their conversation while taking their seats. While I am proud you've managed to touch the hearts of so many people, Midoriya, I can't help but worry if you're truly prepared to handle multiple partners at once, Ida chimed in, sounding a bit concerned. Izuku tilted his head to the side. What do you mean? Well, for example, you have 3 girlfriends, yet only 2 hands. To accentuate his point, he gestured to Izuku, who was already seated between Mina and Ochako, his hands held in theirs, leaving none for Momo. Despite that, she didn't seem very bothered, a sly smirk overtaking her features. Don't worry, I'm sure we'll figure something out. Then, without warning, she sat down on Izuku's lap, neatly crossing one leg over the other like it was any other seat. Yeah. That works perfectly well. Great idea, Momo. Izuku's face burned redder than an active stove as he tried to maintain his composure and not melt into a puddle of pure bliss. Meanwhile, Ochako and Mina both eyed Momo with the same underlying thought. Diamen, she's clever. Why didn't I think of that? Even after they got off the bus, Izuku could still feel the phantom sensation of Momo's weight pressing down on his lap. Honestly, it was a feeling he never wanted to leave him, but he tried his best to forget about it for now, as much more important things were happening in the USJ right now. Welcome, everyone, to the unforeseen simulation joint. The Space Hero, 13 greeted, with one student in particular responding with 10 times as much enthusiasm. Oh my god. It's 13. It's actually them in the flesh. This is the happiest day of my life. Ochako looked like she was on the verge of tears, which Izuku couldn't blame her for. He had felt the urge to react similarly when he met Lunch Rush for the first time. I'm the one in charge of this area, and I'll be the one leading your rescue exercises for today, they continued, clearly used to space-obsessed fans gushing over their presence. You'll all be split into groups across the various zones, where you'll be tasked with rescuing these dummies and getting them out of harm's way. They presented one of the dummies in question, which looked like a fancier, slightly more durable mannequin, blank face and all. Are you going to be saving people with us, Izuku? Mina's tone was sweet as honey butter as she leaned over to him. Not directly, Izuku told her. Quirks like his weren't as suited for rescue compared to Momo's and Ochako's. His job was of lesser importance, but still couldn't be neglected in a situation like this. I talked it over with Aizawa beforehand, and while I'm going to try my hand at a few rescues, I'll mostly be preparing food on the sidelines. After surviving being buried in a landslide, there was nothing a traumatized civilian needed more than a warm, home-cooked meal. But the dummies can't eat any of your food, she pointed out, to which Izuku sighed. Yeah, that's a bit of a shame. I just perfected my recipe for feel-better butter biscuits. He pulled out a steaming tray from somewhere, the smell of which permeated the entire facility, making everyone's mouth salivate. The smell was so good that it compelled the dummy to leap out of 13's arms and snatch a biscuit, having granted itself life solely to try Izuku's cooking. It popped the biscuit into its mouth, then immediately returned to being an inanimate object, its singular life's purpose fulfilled. What? 13 balked at what they had just witnessed, along with everyone else, Izuku included. Midoriya, are you sure your food's not magic or something? Asked Kirishima. Izuku shook his head, his eyes not leaving the lifeless mannequin, as well as the crumbs where its mouth used to be. Nope. The doctor ran multiple tests. It's just really, really good food. Okay then, Let's just get started. 13 decided to brush aside the weirdness and move on. Your groups for this exercise will be dash. They were once again interrupted from their spiel when a purple, swirling void appeared by the main plaza. From it emerged a skinny, hunched-over man covered in disembodied hands. By his side was a finely dressed man whose face was draped in purple mist, and a hulking beast-like figure with notable bovine features. For a moment, a tense silence permeated the USJ, with none of the students sure what to make of this sudden intrusion. Then, all eyes turned to the mist man, who stepped forward like he owned the place. "Greetings, you. We are the League of Villains. My master, Tamura Shigaraki, is here to destroy the symbol of peace." "And where the hell is he?" The handman, presumably Tamura, spat. "I was told there'd be a final boss here, but all he left us with was a bunch of NPCs. Is this part of the exercise?" Ida asked Aizawa, a bit perturbed by the clear dread on his face. In place of a response, he whipped around to address the entire class. "That's not part of the exercise, those are real villains. Everyone to the main entrance now." The students didn't need to be told twice. With varying amounts of urgency, they all turned to rush back the way they came. But before they could reach the oversized doors to freedom, the hulking beast leapt halfway across the USJ in a split second to block their path. Not so fast. Tamura stepped through another portal, ending up right beside the beast. "If All Might's running late, maybe he'll come a bit quicker if I have the Nomu tear his precious students to pieces." "Nomu?" Siro forced down a gulp, to which a wicked grin spread across the villain's face. This thing's genetically engineered to beat All Might to be bloody pulp. It's got shock absorption and hyper-regeneration." Question?" Tamura frustratedly squeezed his mouth shut as Izuku raised his hand. "Does it have a cow quirk?" "What? No." "Okay, then why does it look like a cow?" Izuku gestured to the Nomu's very cow-like features, including its black and white skin, pink snout, and hooves instead of feet. "Because it is a cow. Cows can handle multiple quirks better than people can. So will you shut up and let me dash?" As soon as Tamura blinked, Izuku was inches away from the Nomu, a butcher's knife in hand. One swift slice was all it took to pierce the beast's skin, who didn't even flinch as its arm fell to the ground. Tamura's jaw fell to the floor, along with everyone else's. "Well, what the? Oh yeah, this is some prime beef." Izuku examined the disembodied arm, oblivious to everyone's reactions. "You guys might be villains, but this cow was clearly raised with care. Or maybe that's the strength quirk making the meat richer and more tender. How did you even cut through that?" "It had shock absorption. That's the thing Lunch Rush taught me about knives. If you slice at the right angle, you can cut through just about anything." By now, the Nomu's arm had completely regenerated, and Izuku didn't wait a second before chopping it off again. "And since this cow has regeneration, that means I have access to infinite beef." The laugh that echoed across the dome sent a chill down even the villain's spines, but Izuku didn't care. Now brandishing a knife in each hand, he practically pounced on the Nomu before hacking it into small, portion-sized pieces. When it regenerated, he cut it up all over again and again and again and again and again and again and... why'd it stop? Izuku frowned when the Nomu didn't regenerate after having its insides removed for the umpteenth time. "Oh great! You exhausted its quirk." Tamura resisted the urge to facepalm. "Great job, Ihol. We were supposed to use that against Dash. I am here." Just then, All Might burst through the doors, his signature smile wavering slightly when he caught a glimpse of the intruders. "Who are you? Are you part of the rescue exercise?" "Forget it." Tamura threw his hands in the air. "Open a portal, Kurogyri. We're going home." Kurogyri obliged, and several other villains poked their heads out of the portal he created, looking confused. "Wait, we're leaving already?" said one of them. "We didn't even get to do anything. I wanted to punch some teenagers in the face." "Are we still getting paid?" "No, now move over." Tamura shoved past them as he stepped into the portal, which closed without much fanfare. All Might's eyes darted around the facility. "Is there something that I missed?" I don't think any of this was in the lesson plan. Just forget it. Izawa tiredly rolled his eyes. The next day. So yeah, I wanted to take the Noma back to the kitchen and use it as an infinite source of meat, but apparently the police had to take it away as evidence or something. Can you believe that? I bet we could have solved world hunger with that thing. From the other side of the kitchen, Lunch Rush gave Izuku a sympathetic shrug. I know, it's not exactly sanitary to keep a live cow in the kitchen, but I can dream. He shook his head, deciding to switch gears. But on the bright side, I still got to take home the meat I harvested. You know what that means. With a firm nod, Lunch Rush raised the iron gate separating the kitchen from the rest of the cafeteria, where a swarm of hungry students were already lined up with their trays, ready to get their fill. It's beef day, Izuku cheerfully announced to the crowd. We got enough beef for everyone. Gyudon, beef curry, beef shigerini, cheeseburgers, and steaks bigger than the ones they cook in America. His words caused everyone in line to salivate, their collective hunger deepening tenfold. But Izuku was well versed in dealing with ravenous crowds by now. He moved with almost inhuman speed, serving each student the exact dishes they wanted, some before they could even ask. With Lunch Rush at his side, the horde stood no chance, and within 15 short minutes, almost the entire school had their trays filled, with their stomachs not far behind. Phew, I think today went well. Wearing a satisfied smile, Izuku raised his chef's hat to wipe the budding sweat off his brow. Lunch Rush agreed, shooting his pupil a thumbs up. This small bit of praise was enough to make Izuku's heart burst with joy. Normally, he didn't come into the kitchen looking for praise, but something about receiving acknowledgement from those he idolized always managed to put him in a good mood. And today was only the beginning of it, because from the moment he decided he'd be serving American food, he knew there'd be one hungry mouth that'd appreciate it more than anyone else. Of course, he was talking about All Might. Ever since he heard All Might would be joining the UA teaching staff, he had set his sights on cooking for the #1 hero, just a small way of showing his appreciation for the countless lives he'd saved and people he'd inspired. But for some odd reason, All Might's face was among the few who never stepped foot into the cafeteria. Naturally, Izuku respected All Might's decision. Someone who spent so much time in the public, I would probably want their alone time. But that didn't mean he couldn't try to lure the hero into his domain by cooking up some of his favorite dishes. And yeah, maybe he put a freshly cooked steak in the vent to spread the scent even further across the school, but when he ran into Nizu sleeping in the air duct, he gave him the okay. Sure enough, Izuku's plan was proven successful as the door to the cafeteria swung open. In walked who else but All Might, limply stumbling up to the kitchen like he was drunk on the scent, an effect Izuku's food tended to have on most. Being the excited little chef that he was, Izuku didn't wait for All Might to reach the kitchen, instead meeting him halfway. All Might, so glad you came by. I've prepared a special dish just for you. Reaching behind his back, he presented the hero with a plump, juicy, medium-rare sirloin steak, so large that it required 2 lunch trays to hold. But that didn't mean Izuku sacrificed quality for quantity. One look at the glistening, buttery texture on its surface made it clear that it had been cooked to absolute perfection. And given Izuku's food had already been described as perfect by most, that was saying something. Naturally, All Might salivated so much at the culinary masterpiece that he risked flooding the entire cafeteria. I hope you enjoy. Izuku presented his biggest smile ever as he handed All Might a comically sized fork and knife. But before the hero could dig into a meal of a lifetime, he blinked, seemingly snapping back to his senses. I'm sorry, young Midoriya. I don't know what came over me, but I'm afraid I must decline. He sheepishly turned away from the steak, leaving Izuku more than a little confused. He wasn't exactly used to people turning down his food. What's the problem? Did I make it too medium rare? No, it's perfect. It's just that. He paused, his mind struggling to think of something. I already ate quite a large lunch today. He took a step back from Izuku, who took one forward in response. Oh, come on. You're All Might. I'm sure you can at least try a small bite. The pair's steps became quicker and quicker, until Izuku was chasing the #1 hero in circles around the cafeteria. I really must decline. I'm not sure I can handle another bite. God knows he wanted to. But despite every fiber of his being telling him to go for it, he knew that once he started he wouldn't be able to stop. That, combined with his current lack of a stomach, meant that a single bite of Izuku's steak might actually kill him. If you're not gonna eat it now, at least let me put it in a takeout box for you to eat later. That really isn't necessary. The last thing All Might needed was that steak continuously tempting him from his refrigerator. I'm sorry but I must depart, Nobi. Taking the nearest exit, he pooled all his strength together to leap out of the cafeteria, leaving an All Might-shaped hole in the ceiling. Ah man. Izuku dejectedly stared up at the hole, then down at his steak as he trudged back to the kitchen. I don't get it, lunch rush. I thought he would have loved my food. I guess this is why they say don't meet your heroes, huh? Lunch rush looked like he wanted to say something, but kept his mouth shut, instead offering Izuku a pat on the shoulder. Excuse me. I hope this isn't a bad time. A new voice cut into the conversation. Izuku glanced up to see another customer at his window, and his frown instantly flipped. Oh, Mr. Yagi. Of course not. In fact, I was wondering when you'd show. He reached underneath his counter and presented the skeletal man with a large paper cup and straw. Here's your daily nutrient shake, packed with as much flavor as you're medically allowed to consume. Thank you, my boy. Some of the color turned to Yagi's skin as he took a sip. I cannot thank you enough for this. Truly, it's heroes like you who are the real backbone of this society. Oh, stop. Izuku blushed at the praise while waving goodbye to Yagi. Next to his girlfriends, the frail, yet enthusiastic man was probably his favorite customer. At least he appreciates my food unlike All Might. He folded his arms with a huff, to which Lunch Rush just stared in his direction. Why are you looking at me like that? Is there something you're not telling me? Clearly not, as Lunch Rush just turned back to his station, leaving Izuku to his devices. Which was good, because he had problems of his own to deal with. Now what am I supposed to do with this? He looked down at the giant steak, which was taking up way more kitchen space than it needed to. He knew he wouldn't be able to finish it by himself, and everyone else had already been served their lunches. Preferably, those who could truly appreciate the greasy beauty of American barbecue would be the most fitting to consume such a masterpiece. He had cooked it specifically for All Might, a famous lover of all things American, but he wondered if there was anyone else here who fit the bill. That is smelling delicious. Just like home. Izuku turned to see a head of blonde hair poking through the door, along with a sharp pair of horns. You make that, chef? Why yeah. Despite her attempts to speak proper Japanese, he quickly recognized her American accent, piquing his interest. You're from Class 1B, right? Yup. I'm Pony Tsunatori, or Tsunatori Pony, she corrected, her old habits dying hard. And you're our Midoriya Izuku, right? I try your food every day. It's so yum. Thanks, I appreciate that. But, you said your steak reminded you of home, right? In what sense? Do you maybe have experience with meats? He knew it was a long shot, but who else was he supposed to ask? You bet. She shot him a thumbs up. I grow up on a farm. My parents make cows into meat for a living. I make some good steak myself. As great as that was to hear, Izuku's mind couldn't help but fixate on one specific detail. Hang on, aren't you a cow? Sorry if that's rude, it's just that even though your name's Pony, you still have horns, which horses don't have. Looking away from Izuku, Pony slowly removed her horns from her head and hid them behind her back. Ah, what difference is it making? Steak still tastes the same to me. Okay, good point. Izuku knew that if he was a cow, he still wouldn't have hesitated to chop that Nomu to bits. Well, since you know your way around steaks, care to try mine? He presented the giant steak to Pony, who lit up like it was her birthday, Christmas, Halloween, and New Year's all wrapped into one day. I thought you never ask. Wasting no time, she stepped foot into the kitchen, only for Lunch Rush to live up to his name and rush over to her, forcibly stuffing her mane into a hair net. Alright, gotta keep things sanitary. Izuku pinched himself for forgetting. Something about Pony's shining golden locks just captured all his attention. It was almost a shame to see them bunched away. Okay, maybe Izuku had a type when it came to hair, but don't tell any of his other girlfriends. Pony didn't seem to mind, however, and grabbed her comically sized fork and knife to cut off a piece of the steak. The moment she popped it into her mouth, she hummed like there was somebody else under the table. Oh my god. It's so good. It's so effing good. Holy shit. I think I'm gonna die right now, she said in English. And though Izuku didn't understand every word that came out of her mouth, her feelings were still made crystal clear. Heh, I'm glad you like it. True, he would have liked seeing that reaction from All Might, but it was still just as special coming from Pony. Izzy. She stared at him with a deadly seriousness, completely glossing over the nickname she just assigned him. I'm glad you're not living in America, because your steak would make my family out of business. Izuku laughed, choosing to accept that as a compliment. Oh, come on. I wouldn't let that happen. I'm sure your family's steaks have their merits as well. Nah. Best steaks in the world are right here. She gestured to the entire cafeteria. Almost. Izuku raised a brow. Almost. Yeah, it's still missing something. From her pocket, she pulled out an unlabeled bottle of steak sauce, which she slathered across her dish before taking another bite. Oh yeah, that's it. Now it's perfect. Oh, did you make that yourself? Aha, she said through a mouthful of steak. Try it. Izuku wasn't sure what to expect when Pony tossed him the bottle, but when he dabbed a little sauce on his fingers and gave it a lick, he suddenly felt the urge to chug the whole thing. Oh my god, this is... With shaky hands, he held out the bottle in front of him, part of him unsure if it was even real. Is this how people feel when they eat my food? This is... He couldn't even find the words. I have to try this on something. Here. Without warning, Pony fed Izuku a bite of the sauce-covered steak. The taste alone was enough to make Izuku's knees feel weak. He thought his steak was perfect before, but this right here was perfection squared. An entirely new level of culinary excellence had been reached, and he wanted nothing more than to spread that excellence to all his other dishes, or at least the meat-based ones. Pony. He grabbed her by the shoulders, sharing deeply into her deep, blue, shining, sparkling, radiant eyes, the kind that he needed to make a map for if he didn't want to get lost in them. He knew Pony was beautiful from the moment they met, but now that they were so close, he simply couldn't take his eyes off her. Wait, what was he talking about? Izzy. His nickname snapped him back to his senses. You want me to feed you again? Thanks, he stuttered out, his mind struggling to get back on track. I need to know your steak sauce recipe. I made a few steak sauces before, but none of that compares to yours. Please, show me how it's made. Before Izuku could get down on his knees and beg, like a dog if he had to, Pony spoke up. Sorry, can't be telling you. Family recipe. Oh, Izuku sighed, but ultimately understood. He and his mom came up with their share of recipes together, and he wouldn't trade those for the world. In that case, I'll dash. Hold on. She grabbed him by the hand before he could turn and leave. I'm not gonna tell you, but maybe you could figure it out? Oh. Izuku hummed before the realization fully hit him. Yeah, I guess I could give it a try. He put on a deviously sly grin that matched Pony's. I'm good at deciphering flavors and ingredients. Do you mind if I? His eyes non-subtly trailed over to the bottle of sauce. Go forth it. Pony all but read his mind. Now with the okay, Izuku gave into his urges from earlier and poured some of the sauce into a fancy-looking glass. Then, with the practiced grace of a professional wine taster, he wished it around in his mouth, capturing every last subtle detail. It was like he was analyzing a work of art, using his mouth. Soon, he began to pick out one flavor over another, until he was left with a few base components. Okay, seems like a simple recipe: salted butter, lemon juice, a dash of pepper, the works. He felt as if he had a good grasp on the sauce's composition, so he swallowed it all and made his way to the stove, with Pony following close behind. Okay, I just need to start with the dash. Here you go. Before he could even name the ingredient, Pony reached to a nearby shelf and tossed Izuku exactly what he needed. Oh, perfect. He was a little taken aback, but appreciative of the help. Next I gotta add the dash. This opponent proved she had fantastic aim when the ingredient landed right in Izuku's open palm. Yes, exactly. By now, Izuku could tell he and Pony were in sync, so he decided to stretch that bond as far as it would go. Now could you hand me the dash? Yup. And then pass me the dash. Aha. Now I need the dash. Right there. And it's done. As quickly as they had started, they were now face to face with a completed pot of sauce. As far as looks went, it was a dead ringer for the contents in Pony's bottle, with the color and texture completely indistinguishable. But none of that mattered if the taste wasn't right. Care to do the honors? Izuku presented his partner in crime with a spoonful of his homemade sauce. I would love to. Instead of accepting the spoon, she leaned forward and wrapped her mouth around the head, so now he was the one feeding her this time. She looked up at Izuku with a teasing grin and enjoyed watching his face turn as pink as the steak he just cooked. When she actually tried the sauce, however, her smile didn't last. What's wrong? Izuku's smile dropped like an anvil. Is it not good? No, it's still gooder than ever. But, you missed the secret ingredient. Izuku dumbly palmed himself on the head. Oh, of course. What kind of secret recipe doesn't have a secret ingredient? That's right. She gave him a knowing smirk. Can you guess what it is? My guess is you can't. It's love, isn't it? Though it was just a guess on Izuku's part, his tone held an air of certainty. In all his years of cooking, love had continuously proven itself as a universal spice, able to turn any good dish great and any great dish excellent. It was why he kept a tiny pouch full of love on him at all times. As he sprinkled the sparkly pink substance into the saucepan, he noticed Pony shooting him an odd look. That what love looks like? Yeah, it's actually a chemical recreation of the endorphins the brain produces when experiencing positive emotions. You can find it at Walmart for pretty cheap, but I produce mine naturally. Wait, how do you dash? And it's ready. Izuku didn't waste any time trying a sample for himself, but he wished he had as soon as the taste hit his tongue. No, it's still not right. My family don't cook with love, Pony informed him of the harsh truth, which Izuku struggled to comprehend. I don't get it. How could it taste so good despite not being made with love? What other secret ingredients are you using? Is it Worcestershire? Is that it? He threw a smidge into the pan and gave it a taste, but that only worsened its flavor. Nope. Pony bit her tongue to stop herself from giggling. Then it's paprika. It's always paprika. He tried again with paprika, getting a similar result. Nope. Chili powder? Nope. Vinegar? Nope. Hot sauce? Yep. Really? Nope. Dang it. In a fit of anger, he grabbed his saucepan and chucked it into the sink, not caring if the sauce splattered across the kitchen. That mistake of his didn't deserve the time of day. If I can't rely on my own intuition, I'll have to rely on the next best thing. Science. Pony's eyes somehow grew wider than they already were. You a scientist? No, I see cooking as more of an art than a science, but I know someone who doesn't. Boom. Hi, Chef Guy. May greeted Izuku as she usually did, with an explosion blowing the doors to the support lab off their hinges. Fortunately, both he and Pony had the foresight to back up just in time, avoiding facefuls of soot. Hi, handsome. Izuku cheerfully greeted. Remember the flavor finder machine I asked you to make? How could I forget? It's one of my best babies yet, with the ability to determine any ingredient from a single sample of food with 100% accuracy. It can even distinguish gluten-free food from the regular stuff. That's such coolness. Pony gaped at the description. Coolness is right. Now what food do you need the machine to analyze? Just this bottle of sauce. Izuku handed it to her, knowing she'd take good care of it. That's it? Then this shouldn't take long at all. Follow me. She brought the pair to the back of the support lab, where they were met with a microwave attached to a giant supercomputer. How's it working? Pony trotted up to the machine, curiously running her hands around the microwave's metal exterior. For all intents and purposes, it looked and felt like a regular microwave, but somehow she could tell it was so much more. You just put it here and, tada? Pretty much. The results will be displayed on the computer screen after a few seconds. Now let's get started. Wearing her trademark unhinged mad scientist smile, she pulled out the bottle from her pocket and shoved it into the microwave. Only, the bottle was empty. Handsome. Izuku turned to the inventor, spotting a few new smudges on her face that decidedly weren't from soot. What happened to the sauce? A crack formed in her smile, and within seconds, she was kneeling on the floor, breaking down into tears. I drank it all. Every last drop. It was just so good I couldn't help myself. I'm a disgrace to the scientific community. She pulled out a katana, and likely would have driven it into her chest if Izuku and Pony didn't tackle her to the ground. After calming Mei down and sending her off to hound dog, Izuku and Pony sat back down at the cafeteria, the situation still weighing on them somewhat. Well, on the bright side, she's still alive. Izuku spoke up after what felt like a lifetime of silence. But I guess I'll never figure out that secret sauce recipe. He sighed, slumping forward on the table. He supposed it was fine at the end of the day. His cooking was already incredible, so what if he couldn't take it to the next level? So what if he couldn't go plus ultra like so many other students did at this school? It was fine. He'd be fine. You know, Pony spoke up, turning to meet Izuku in the eyes. Maybe there's one other way for you to be getting the recipe. But how? I've tried pretty much everything I can think of. Well, the sauce is a family recipe. She scooted closer to Izuku so the two were inches apart. Maybe if you were family, she placed her hand atop Izuku's, I would tell you then. Izuku's gaze turned deadly serious. For a moment, Pony wondered if she'd done something wrong, but those thoughts immediately left her the moment Izuku seized her lips and pulled her into a passionate, loving kiss. She may have just tried his steak earlier today, but she decided that this was her new favorite taste. After their impromptu make-out session, Izuku led his newest girlfriend into the kitchen so she could show him the true secret behind her sauce. Okay, you ready, Izzy? Pony held an almost complete batch of the sauce, ready to add the secret ingredient. Izuku watched intently, a notebook in one hand and a pen in the other. I'm ready. Show me how it's made. Here goes. With both hands, Pony lifted up the saucepan to her face. Her face then contorted with untold amounts of rage as she shook it back and forth, like she was trying to strangle it. Why a stupid piece of shit, she yelled at the sauce. I hate you. I hate you so much. I hope you and everyone you love dies. To anyone else, it looked like Pony had just gone crazy. But to Izuku, he perfectly understood what was going on. The secret ingredient isn't love, it's spite. I guess Kaken had the right idea with his cooking after all.